Welcome back to another FPL reaction stream. There is one game left of match day 10. We're already looking forward to game week 11, and there is UCL Fantasy in between. There is a limitless video that was uploaded earlier today, and it was released for channel members and patrons on Friday night. So they got 2 days early access essentially, and there's going to be a best wildcard squad tomorrow, my team selection for match day 4, where I've still got the limitless at my disposal, and that will likely be deployed in either match day 4 or 5. And of course, on Tuesday, there will be a hectic deadline stream answering all your questions for the Matchday 4 deadline and covering the early lineups for Napoli versus Frankfurt and also Slavia Prague against Arsenal. Let's get straight into your comments and questions as always. And despite getting a green arrow and I'm now comfortably into the top 1 million, the bench boost has been a massive disappointment so far. And that benching for Rangers kind of summed it up. He almost scored towards the end of that game in that 3-1 victory for Man City, but it wasn't meant to be. But I captain Erling Haaland. That's going to be 13 points for him once again. And Gabriel was a consideration for the captaincy. As you can see, he was my vice. And after yesterday, I was thinking maybe I made a mistake not captaining him, but Erling Haaland with a brace and also carrying Manchester City into second position. But apart from that, Lacroix and Sanchez were the kind of standouts with low effective ownership, getting clean sheets. And of course, in the case of Lacroix, some DEFCON as well. So 8 points is very solid. Semenyo blanked. Joao Pedro, though, keeping him has finally paid off, but we'll see how he does against the Wolves side, who will have a new manager after Vitor Pereira was sacked earlier today. And he got maximum bonus points. He also missed multiple big chances. Chelsea completely dominated that game against Tottenham Hotspur and should have won by 3 or 4 goals, to be honest. But Voltemada and Dan Burn were absolutely catastrophic today. The likes of Gordon and Voltemada were subbed off at half-time, and West Ham were 1-0 down and yet went on to win 3-1, their first Premier League home win since February. So a lot has gone on. Ismail Assar went one-on-one against Brentford and missed a glorious opportunity. He hit the post, and Bruno Fernandes got an assist for Casemiro in a 2-2 draw for Manchester United. And one of my new signings, Jurrien Timber, got a clean sheet, kind of standard stuff. And in the end, keeping Sanchez and buying Timber instead of going for Raya in goal and keeping Borro paid off a little bit with a 4-point swing. Nothing massive, but I'll take it. I will take, to be honest, a clean sheet from Ranilo Mandava. That would be absolutely fine. It's not a good bench boost, but if you can get 6 to 8 points, I'll be very happy with that and then move on. And I've got 2 chips remaining for the first half of the season. Of course, later on, I'll show you the FDR and a few different bits and bobs, but keep your eyes peeled for more FPL content ahead of Game Week 11, the transfer tips, best wildcard team, my team selection, and the next deadline stream as well. I took a -4 hit to bring in Saka and Sarr for Salah and King. That is the first message of the day. Yeah, that is a very tough one to take. I still think as a duo, Saka and Sarr is far superior, while Salah has been getting the returns in the last 2 games. That was an absolute gift by Emi Martinez, and King isn't doing it. He's a 4-point family midfielder. He's just going to sit on your bench anyway. I don't like him as an option to start week in, week out. Juba the guy says, my team is Raya, Dubravka, Munoz, Mukiele, Gabriel, Esteve, Borro, Sarr, Salah, Semenyo, Neto, Caicedo, Joao Pedro, Gyökeres, Voltemada, 2 free transfers, 0.5 in the bank. Of course, it's early days. The point of this reaction stream is to offer my initial takes and raw reactions after the game week. And of course, we still have 1 match left tomorrow. But I think your defensive line stands out as an area for improvement. I know Gabriel, Munoz are 2 players I'd love to have, of course. I've got Gabriel and not Munoz. I think the rest, though, is definitely... You can definitely improve upon it. You've got 2 4 million midfielders, defenders in Esteve and Mukiele. And you've also got Borro, who is sellable, and I was very happy to have sold him, of course, before the deadline yesterday. As for the midfield, I'm not a massive fan of having Neto and Caicedo. I think Caicedo would be more than enough, but you wouldn't sell a Chelsea attacker against Wolves at home and Burnley away. It's also Pedro Neto facing his former club, but I think in Game Week 13, I'd highly recommend selling Pedro Neto. Your front line is fine for now, as in isolation, those are all good picks. I think Gyökeres will be available for Game Week 11, but you don't have Erling Haaland. That is a massive concern there, and he just keeps on scoring brace after brace, and only 2 blanks so far this season. Yeah, so despite the fact that your defensive line could improve, so you can have a reliable third defender to start week in, week out, I think even selling Salah to get Haaland is still an option for you. Now, there is a case to keep Salah and these Liverpool attackers with the upcoming fixtures, but yeah, the way Haaland is moving, I don't think the fixtures are too important. He's still going to get returns. Bournemouth was actually an opponent he struggled against historically, never scored against them at home in the Premier League, and he got a brace today. So, yeah, I think it has to be Erling Haaland in. If Gyökeres, for example, is ruled out, then I'd keep it quite simple. Do Gyökeres to Haaland and do Salah downgraded to a different midfielder to make that possible. That could be Mbeumo. Bukayo Saka still is a good option, but he was very disappointing against Burnley yesterday. Thinking of Gyökeres and Borro to Timber and Thiago. Yeah, in isolation, those are good transfers. I like that. And it's good that you identify Borro as a sell, because I agree with you. I think Timber's an upgrade. I made that transfer yesterday. And Thiago is still a decent budget forward. Probably my favourite still, but Danny Welbeck has been in great form recently, scoring in the last 3 Premier League matches. So yeah, good transfers. Ultimately, if Gyökeres is fit though, he is still a good option to hold on to. But as a duo, it does make sense to me. So I can understand that. Denegator puts a squad. Nothing in the bank, 1 free transfer plans. So yeah, we're getting a few of these. You say plan to wildcard in Gameweek 13. Did Virgil to Timber this week? Although if I did Gyökeres to Mateta and Borro to Gabriel, I'd have gotten more points. Yeah, but Gyökeres played brilliantly in the first half. It's a bit unfortunate to have him subbed off because of a muscle problem, a knock he suffered. I think it's also part because Arteta wants to rotate his squad and preserve the likes of Gyökeres, who has played a lot of minutes this season. But look, honestly, keeping Gyökeres proved to be a decent decision, right? He got 7 points despite not even playing 60 minutes. That's just a bit unfortunate. So, yeah, with Gabriel is the best defender in the game. I've been saying that for months now. It's quite clear at this point. And ultimately, yeah, that would be a great transfer for you. You can still do that sort of duo switch in Gameweek 11. You could argue it's a bit too late with Gabriel, but yeah, I think he's definitely worth the ownership and the high price tag. He's set to go up in price tonight, by the way, Gabriel Magalhaes, so be very mindful about that. Looking at your squad, I think it's worth highlighting the players you could sell. So up until Gameweek 13, I think Sanchez could be held on to, so you don't need to make a transfer there. It's also Wolves at home and Burnley away. In your defensive line, I think Senesi could be benched against Aston Villa and then reintroduced into your starting 11 from Gameweek 12 onwards. Timber is absolutely fine, but Konsa is a sell. Esteve is only a 4 million defender, so you don't need to prioritise that transfer. But I've always said from the beginning, if you go for Dubravka as your backup goalkeeper, I wouldn't go for Esteve. I'd rather go for a Leeds or Sunderland defender, which has always been my preference since the beginning. And Pedro Porro is a sell. That's quite clear. So yeah, doing Borro to Gabriel is still on the cards for you, but you need to make a downgrade elsewhere to make that possible. So maybe Gyökeres to Mateta is the way to go. But in terms of the other weaknesses, I'd highlight Reinders as a clear sell. I've been discussing this for quite some time. I had other fires to put out and other areas of improvement. But yeah, in hindsight, I wish I had sold Reinders. He almost scored today, just like he almost scored a few weeks ago against Everton. But the returns just simply haven't been there. So I think your transfer plans are absolutely sound, getting Mateta and Gabriel. But Gyökeres is still a decent hold in most situations. So there's even more follow-up to that. So one, should I do that this week? Gyökeres and Borro to Mateta and Gabriel for -4. 2, do Borro to Reece James for a 2-week punt as I'm wildcarding in 13. So a few weeks ago, I talked about buying Reece James up until Gameweek 13. I think that makes a lot of sense for Gameweek 13 wildcarders, but I'd probably just take the -4 hit if Gyökeres is ruled out. I don't think that'll be the case, to be fair. So it's not like a clear, you have to do this, or this is clearly the best avenue for your team. If it was for free, then yeah, as I mentioned to you a few minutes ago, I do like that set of transfers. But for a -4 hit, it is a little bit difficult and it does cause a bit of conflict. But I'd probably do number 1 and take a -4 hit. In the end, it should pay off. And Mateta is arguably the second best forward in FPL up until Gameweek 17. Of course, Erling Haaland is number 1. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Denegator, and let me know your thoughts. In terms of a Gyökeres update, it's nothing serious. Arteta talked about this after the game, and his exact quote was, "The first half was one of the best he has played with us. He felt something muscular, so we have to wait to learn the extent of that." So we will see the lineup, of course, in UCL Fantasy before the deadline, because Arsenal are one of the early kickoffs, which I referred to at the beginning of this stream. And if Gyökeres isn't on the bench, then that would be a huge cause for concern, because Arsenal could rotate against Slavia Prague and still win. I think Sunderland will be a very difficult test next week. But yeah, ultimately, I think with the Champions League there on Tuesday, for those with Gyökeres, it's worth holding on to him. Now, if you're in a situation like Denegator where you want to get Gabriel or a player of that ilk, and you need to downgrade someone like Gyökeres to Mateta to make that happen, then you could definitely make a case for making the transfers early. But I always prioritize information over price changes if possible. I haven't done that always this season, but I think generally speaking, it's the best thing you can do to make informed decisions. But Gyökeres, I think, will be fine for the Sunderland game, and he played brilliantly against Burnley. It's just a shame he felt that muscular problem. So how Wolves sacking Vitor Pereira impacting players to buy against them? Well, I mean, the kind of simplest answer I can give is manager bounce, right? And it all depends on who they appoint. Gary O'Neill is currently the favourite, and oddly enough, Vitor Pereira was appointed to replace Gary O'Neill in the first place. But yeah, I think with Chelsea, for example, I've seen some of their fans complaining about their luck. It happens, right? Arsenal faced Nottingham Forest. I know Ange Postecoglou turned out to be a disaster, but that was literally his first game. With Nuno as well, it was his second game, but he also was appointed for West Ham just a few days beforehand and then played Arsenal. So these things can happen, right? But yeah, I think with Wolves, they've been all over the place this season. And with my predicted lineups, they're by far the team I've done the worst in. I think 77 out of 99 before this week. They also made several other changes this week, which are quite baffling. And Wolves fans before the Fulham game were saying, look, if you don't get the result, you're in big trouble, Vitor Pereira. And that's what happened. It's just kind of odd that, you know, the board, well, maybe not now after what I saw in the reports today, but they offered him a 3-year contract only like a month ago. But there was a clause in there that basically prevented any sort of payout for Vitor Pereira. And now I'm guessing he's going to regret that. But he does want to stay in the Premier League. He was one of the contenders for the Premier League manager of the season last time out. But I did say this before, even when he was doing well at Wolves, he had Aït-Nouri and Cunha doing really well. I just felt that Vitor Pereira isn't a long-term manager. I looked at his history, even in Saudi Arabia and other countries, and he never lasted long at any club. And I thought at Wolves, they'd be in big trouble this season, and ultimately they're even worse than I expected. So once again, easy. I mean, I know you put a lot of messages here. It's very early on in the season. Arsenal are the favourites now, but let's not forget how things looked like at the beginning. You know, before a ball was even kicked, and then when Liverpool won the first 5 games, everyone said, just give the title to Liverpool now. It's too early to judge things. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I think Arsenal will be consistent and solid, but Liverpool went from winning the first 5 to losing 4 in a row in the Prem, 6 out of 7 in all competitions. Football is full of surprises. Sometimes you get injuries or teams find you out. Maybe you just have a little rough patch. So it's too early, I think. But Arsenal in a great position to win trophies. I think they will this season, but it's too early. We can't say they've won the Premier League already. And I think the only time Arsenal have bottled the league in recent seasons was the first time they competed in 2022-23, where they were outstanding in the first half of the season, got to April, top of the league. They had like a 5-point gap. I think the maximum it ever was probably 8, with Man City always having a game in hand. And then from that point onwards, they shat the bed. But I think apart from that, Arsenal haven't really bottled it, as people say. Obviously, you say it in the next message. I think 23-24. The first half of the season wasn't great. They were third in the league. Liverpool were top by like 5 points, and Man City were also in second. It was quite competitive between those 3. Arsenal had an outstanding second half of the campaign, and only 1 game cost them, you could say, in Aston Villa. But I also looked at Fulham at home, Fulham away in the first half of the campaign and stuff like that. Also West Ham at home. There are a few other results that I think were even more costlier or more frustrating than Aston Villa at home in the second half of the season. So as for last season, I don't think Arsenal were ever in the title race, to be honest. And they had a lot of injuries, not enough squad depth, and it soon became apparent that Liverpool were the best team. But yeah, now we're getting that impression with Arsenal, but it's October. It's too early to judge. Well, Voltemada off at halftime. Yeah, I did cover this earlier. Who are the best captains for Gameweek 11? Keep your eyes peeled for my upcoming videos. This will likely be addressed in the best wildcard team for Gameweek 11, so that will probably be published on the Wednesday or Thursday. But yeah, unfortunately, Erling Haaland will still be up there, despite facing Liverpool, who got a big win yesterday against Aston Villa. They still looked a bit shaky, and I think the Villains missed a few opportunities or openings to really punish Liverpool. And the form Haaland is in at the Etihad, I'd back him to score again, so he's naturally going to be up there. I'd be less keen on Arsenal assets against Sunderland. I think against Burnley, I mentioned Timber, Gabriel and Saka, of course, Gyökeres as well, as some of my favourite options. But yeah, I think it's a bit more open in Gameweek 11. Joao Pedro against Wolves at home suddenly becomes very appealing. Enzo Fernandez, despite that frustrating blank against Tottenham Hotspur. But yeah, give me a few days. I'll compile the list. You'll see the graphics, and you'll see my definitive list, of course, in the next deadline stream next week. Erling Haaland is literally a robot. 296. Let me just get that up again. Sorry. goals in his entire career so far. It's crazy, right? He's like 24 years old. I actually remember when I started making UCL fantasy content, you know, he was already tearing it up. Even before Borussia Dortmund at Red Bull Salzburg, he was 4.5 million in UCL fantasy. Can you imagine that? And I actually saw his Champions League debut. He scored a hat-trick in the first half. So, yeah, it became apparent from very early on that he's just a goal-scoring machine. And he's actually improving his all-round game. So, yeah, it's going to be very tough for him not to win Player of the Season. But, yeah, it also depends on who wins the Premier League title. But Man City, for me, are going to be the main competitors for Arsenal. Liverpool will still be in the mix. I think they can build some momentum, especially after Man City. And I think most Arsenal fans will hope for a draw next week between Man City and Liverpool. He could break his own goal record. Yeah, we always say this, though. After the incredible start he had last season for the first 5 games, we all were convinced he would get, 40 goals probably. But, yeah, there can be a rough patch as well. Man City's next few fixtures aren't great. That included Bournemouth, but he still scored a brace. My prediction, I think, was 35 goals. I need to check. I said it in a stream. I can't remember which one, but I think my prediction for Haaland a few weeks ago, maybe even months ago, was that he'll score 35 Premier League goals and just miss out on breaking the record. Went fancy and captain Saka over Haaland, never again. Yeah, that's kind of funny, mate, because then a few messages later, I'm going to be fancy again and captain Joao Pedro, so fair enough. That's the problem sometimes with FPL. You go for something different, it backfires, and that puts you off from ever going differential again. There is a balancing act, right? I think Saka was a great captaincy decision. He had 2 big chances, and he was quite wasteful with the opportunities. And, you know, a few years ago, I know we're looking back to 2023-24, but he was the star against Burnley in a 5-0 win, I think, at Turf Moor. He got a brace. He was incredible. I think he might have gotten 18 points or something. So, yeah, it did swing a lot against you this time. And I think rivaling Haaland for the captaincy this week made sense because of his record against Bournemouth, who were second in the Premier League table before today. So it's just a bit unfortunate, I think, for the swing to be that massive. 78, nice. Yeah, that's a good score this week, in my opinion. I saw a few questions and stuff. I think Baraf was the one, if I can get it up here. What's the safety score? It all depends on your rank, right? I think the average or the overall safety score is around 61, 62. But for me personally, a 71 at the rank I'm at. In the top 10k will be even higher. So it all depends on your rank as well. Haaland helped me out a lot. 7 points from a green on 64 points. Still have Tarkowski and Mukiele to go though. Also, my guy Bone was so unlucky not to get a returned. Hope you're well also, mate. Thank you very much, FPL Kevy. I like Jarrod Bowen a lot as a player. I remember yesterday you said he's your favourite, you know, probably non-Arsenal player in the Premier League, right? Yeah, it's a good score, and you've got 2 players left. Hopefully for you, one of them gets a return, and to be honest, if I had a horse in the race, it would be Mukiele, since I've got Reinildo Mandava as part of my bench boost. Greenia says, shall I bench boost Dubravka, Semenyo, Senesi, Rodon? I got Bowen, though. It's not a terrible bench boost, but both Semenyo and Senesi are facing Aston Villa away. I think Semenyo can do just fine at Villa Park, but not Senesi. I'm only expecting Defcon from him. Yeah, with Rodon, I wouldn't be particularly infused, to be quite honest with you. The same goes for Martin Dubravka, but that's just the way I see it. I mean, West Ham away is normally a good fixture, but obviously you look at that big result for them today, that could be the start of something decent under Nuno Espirito Santo. Nottingham Forest away for Rodon. It's not a bad bench boost. What I'd encourage you to do, as I always say, go to FPL.team, visualize future game weeks, and see how your team looks like, and you know which fixtures look the best for your 15-man squad. But it's a decent bench. I'll say it like that. If I still had the bench boost, I'd probably use it in Game Week 11 in your situation, but it's not crystal clear. Should I sell Salah and Gyökeres to Haaland and Rice? Okay, so you're suggesting something different to what you did earlier. I do like Rice as an FPL option. I said this before yesterday's deadline. He was already up there in terms of points scored amongst midfielders. He's now second, only behind Semenyo. I'd probably do it. It would be for a -4 hit. Salah has now scored in back-to-back games. He got 10 points against Aston Villa. I mean, look, we'll see if Liverpool can build upon this, but they were a bit fortunate not to concede, and I also think it was a massive gift by Emi Martinez. That changed the game, in my opinion. I'm not saying Liverpool you know, going to lose against City and, you know, they're not going to win another game. I think they'll go on a run after City, and we'll see what happens next weekend. My current prediction is a draw, and that's my hope. But yeah, Haaland, the form he's in, He's just too good right now, and there's no other premium that really competes with him on a consistent basis. 79 -4, Little Green Arrow 2, 600k. I'm happy with where I'm at. Yeah, look, that rank is always decent, but especially at this stage of the season, we're still in November, of course. I did say October, by the way, didn't I? I'm stuck in the past. Yeah, we are in November now. It's still very early days, right? And 75 points with the -4 hit taken into account is very solid. Should I start Estev ahead of Borro? Interesting one. I mean, Tottenham have a brilliant record against Manchester United, but I mean, based on recent form and also the way Spurs play at home, I think United have a great chance of getting a result there. But yeah, with Pedro Porro, even if Spurs were to win, I just don't see Porro keeping a clean sheet. So then you're relying on attacking threat, maybe Defcon. So I'll be honest, I'd still start Porro because I think West Ham will score against Burnley as well. And ultimately, the Spaniard has more avenues to points. But I think the best thing to do is sell Porro to another premium like Munoz, Gabriel, Timber, and bolster your defensive line. 76 points, that's solid. If you've got any Sunderland or Everton players, that could be bolstered tomorrow. Obviously, I've got Ndai and Reinildo, so I'm hoping one of them at least gets a return. Goated intro song, thank you very much. That is once again by my cousin. All of the songs in the waiting section are. And I did change the song that you see with the thumbnail as well. 76 points. Yeah, a lot of 70s flying around. That's solid. Jubert says Scott 72 and Mukiele still to play. Nicely done. And also Faris says 73 with a -4, but then Die left. So yeah, 70 plus should be attainable unless something goes horribly wrong tomorrow. And yeah, Ndai is a quality player. Very exciting to watch. He doesn't get a massive ceiling. That's my major criticism about him. And I think the main reason why he doesn't really get double-digit hauls is because his teammates are poor finishers, so he's not getting assists despite creating chances, and some of them are big opportunities. So if he can add assists on top of the goals, then you're going to see some massive returns from Ndai, and I still think he offers good value at 6.5 million. Captain Gabriel by accident over Haaland, because it started as a joke, but turned out better than I expected. Yeah, in the end, only 1 point lost, right? If you got Gabriel and Haaland, that's essentially all you've lost out on, so it's not too shabby, right? So I wouldn't worry about it. I honestly thought Gabriel was one of the main contenders. If you looked at my Camsey list in the deadline stream, Gabriel was third, and arguably he could have been second or first. But in the end, Haaland, as usual, won the Camsey debate. Should I transfer Semenyo for Mbeumo? Well, this is the thing, right? After Aston Villa away, Bournemouth have promising fixtures, and Semenyo has been off it in recent matches. And it all started, of course, against Crystal Palace, where he got booked and only got 1 assist and a free draw. But I'll be honest with you, I'd still keep Semenyo for now. DCL, Dubravka, Rodon, Senesi. Should we do bench boost? So I did cover this earlier, mate. At least I covered something very similar. I think the other person mentioned Semenyo instead of DCL. It's not a bad bench. I'd probably say yes, but I don't like DCL. If you can upgrade him to Thiago, Welbeck, I'd highly recommend you do so. And I also think it's worth going to FPL.team, visualize future game weeks, see what fixtures your team would have in every single game week, and then you can decide the best time to bench boost. Which teams to target for the next few game weeks? I think that's a great segue for the FDR, the fixture difficulty rating. So at top spot now is Chelsea, who face Wolves at home and Burnley away over the next 2. Then they face Arsenal. They've got Leeds away and Bournemouth away, but then Everton at home in game week 16. Fulham are second, with Crystal Palace, Newcastle and United in the top 5. I still think Arsenal is the team to really target, have a double or triple up. I would probably have 2 Palace players. I don't really blame people who go for free. That is still, viable. There's a lot of talk, of course, of the double happening in 16 for Arsenal and Everton, and the likes of Palace and Leeds also blanking in 17 on top of Arsenal and Everton. As I covered in my predicted lineups and in yesterday's stream, it is extremely unlikely that it's going to happen, or at least it's less likely now. I think that's the right thing to say, and I did cover the reasons why, but I'd say Arsenal, Crystal Palace, probably Chelsea still, with Enzo Fernandez, Caicedo, Joao Pedro, and maybe 1 defender, but I don't think that's a priority. They're still very vulnerable defensively. I think the other team to have at least 1 player from is United, so either Mbeumo or Fernandez, but that's it. I wouldn't go for anybody else in that United team. And from Newcastle, I still like their assets like Voltemada and a defender or Nick Pope. But of course, that performance today was very worrying, and I'm surprised at the fact that Voltemade and Gordon were subbed off for half-time. If we look near the bottom of this list though, Sunderland, Leeds, Wolves, Spurs and Everton are in the bottom 5, and Arsenal are 7th, Liverpool 6th. So some of the top teams do have promising fixtures over the next 6 game weeks, according to Fantasy Football Hub. I don't agree with some of these classifications. For example, you look at Chelsea facing Arsenal in game week 13, and Arsenal are labelled as like a okay fixture. I don't see how that's the case, maybe because it's at home, but I have a different opinion. With predicted points, looking at game week 11, Erling Haaland is top, despite facing Liverpool, the Premier League champions at home. 7.7 expected points for him. Jean-Philippe Mateta is second, with Saka, Salah, Enzo Fernandez, Gabriel, Joao Pedro, Bruno Fernandes, Semenyo and Cucurella in the top 10. So for those asking about captaincy options, this could also provide a decent list for you, but not all of these players will feature in my top 10 captaincy list, which I'll talk about in future videos. Probably the best wildcard squad, but keep your eyes peeled for the transfer tips and team selection as well. I also want to show you potential price rises today. I still think it's worth holding out if possible, because we've got Champions League, Europa Conference League and Europa League games in midweek, but the likes of Gabriel, Mateta, Rice, Caicedo and Welbeck could rise in price tonight. As for price falls, Reinders, who is still stinking out the gaff in my team, Arias, Sosa, Aiden Heaven, Visser and Maddison could all go down. Not all of these will happen though. It's worth saying that, but livefpl.net is probably the most reliable when it comes to predicting price changes. It's also a great site to visualize future game weeks like fpl.team, and you can also check your progress. So all the ranks you see in this stream are taken by the website livefpl.net. So I also want to compare the stats of 2 of the best midfielders in the Premier League, Declan Rice and Moises Caicedo. These are the attacking numbers, and ultimately they play different roles. Rice is more of an offensive, all-round midfielder, whilst Moises Caicedo is the presser, the holding midfielder there for Chelsea, and he's providing great defensive stability, despite the fact that Chelsea are still quite leaky defensively. But it's 3 goals for Caicedo, and with Declan Rice, he's got 1 and 4 fantasy assists, 8 shots overall for Declan Rice, 10 for Caicedo. Only 2 on target for Declan Rice though. Caicedo has doubled that, but in terms of shots in the box, both of them quite poor. Rice with 3 and Caicedo with 2. The XG is 0.86 for Rice, so it is slightly higher. The same goes for XA, which is significantly higher, to be fair, at 1.86. 2 big chances and 3 big chances created for Declan Rice, and 16 key passes. He's actually got the most chances created in the Premier League in the entire calendar year. So Caicedo, only 1 big chance, 0 big chance created, and 3 key passes. The XG is only 0.57, and the XA is 0.39. Now, if you're asking me, I'm really tempted by Declan Rice as an option at 6.7 million, soon to be, I believe. So he could go up in price tonight, as I showed you in the previous section. Caicedo costs 5.9. I wouldn't even mind having both of them in your FPL setup. I think some of these holding midfielders, or, you know, Declan Rice is not traditionally an attacking midfielder, right? He's a number 8, box-to-box now at Arsenal, but his delivery from set pieces is right up there in the world, and I think you've always got a chance of returns with Declan Rice. Let me now show you a visualization of a future game week using the website fpl.team. So looking at game week 11, this will be talked about, of course, in my team selection. I could go for something like this with Reinders, Burn and Rinaldo on the bench. Dubravka as well, facing West Ham away. I would start Robert Sanchez against Wolves, despite the potential managerial bounce there after Vitor Pereira's dismissal. I think starting Lacroix and Sarr makes a lot of sense against Brighton at home. Timber and Gabriel against Sunderland away. I wouldn't vice-captain Gabriel, though. I think someone like Joao Pedro could even take the vice-captaincy. Voltemade, despite that disappointing 1-pointer today, would still be in my starting 11. Ndai against Fulham at home. Fernandes away to Tottenham in the early kickoff. And Joao Pedro, of course, looks very promising. Erling Haaland, despite facing Liverpool, is still probably the best captaincy option for Game Week 11. And you might be wondering, what about FPL Challenge? Well, it actually went even better than Fantasy Premier League for me, relatively speaking. In Mbumo, the only blanker so far, and I've got 1 player left in Roofs facing Everton at home tomorrow. Gabriel got 12 points, and this week, the challenge was called Winning Feeling, so double points are awarded for all winning goals, 1 player per club, and an unlimited budget. So Danny Welbeck got 10 points, Mateta with 13, and Erling Haaland will get 3 bonus points, so that's 6 additional points to the 65 you see on screen. So 71 points overall in FPL Challenge with 1 player remaining tomorrow night. So after showing you all of that, I think it's probably worth going to my scoreline predictions. Why not? Yeah, why not? So we can see what I got right and what my prediction is for tomorrow's game. And after, I will go back to my FPL squad. So Brighton 1, Leeds 0. We all know how it turned out in the end. And by the way, I will go through the bonus points. I think that's one other thing that's worth covering. Ignore the rank that you see in this screen. That was before the Game Week 10 deadline. Burnley 0, Arsenal 2 was my correct scoreline prediction from yesterday. I went for 2-1 Crystal Palace, 2-1 Fulham, 1-0 United. I went for a 2-2 draw between Chelsea and Tottenham, but yeah, to be honest with you, Chelsea always beat Tottenham. I think from the last 10 Premier League matches, Chelsea have 8 victories. I also said Liverpool 3, Aston Villa 2, West Ham 0, Newcastle 2, so that was horrendously wrong, and Man City 2, Bournemouth 1. And I've got the same scoreline for tomorrow's game in favour of Sunderland to beat the Toffees by the same scoreline, 2-1. So let's now go to the matches and see the bonus points. So we'll start off with the 3-0 win for Brighton. So Gomez, Vifa and Van Heck were the ones claiming the bonus. In terms of DEFCON, Vifa was the only one for Brighton and also the only one from the entire match. In Arsenal's 2-0 victory, the bonus points were given to Declan Rice and the likes of Gabriel Gyökeres shared 2 bonus points. With DEFCON, it was Rice, Gabriel, Tuanzebe. They were the only players to secure DEFCON. So with Crystal Palace's 2-0 win, the bonus points went to Mateta, Gay and Lerma, and DEFCON was awarded to Gay, Kamada, Lacroix, Collins and Van den Berg. Ismail Assar wasn't too far off, by the way, and he was a bit frustrating to own yesterday after that huge miss when he went one-on-one after a massive Collins mistake, to be honest. So the next game is a 3-0 win for Fulham, which led to a managerial change for bottom-of-the-table Wolves. The bonus points went to Sessegnon, Wilson and Leno, and DEFCON was awarded to Menezzi, Santiago Bueno, and that's it. So Nottingham Forest 2, Manchester United 2. The bonus points went to Casemiro, Amad Diallo and Gibbs White, whilst Anderson, Murillo, Casemiro, Cunha all secured DEFCON. In Chelsea's 1-0 win yesterday, João Pedro claimed maximum bonus, Moises Caicedo got 2 and Malo Gusto picked up 1. With DEFCON, João Paulinho, Pape Matar Sarr, Moises Caicedo and Chalobah were the only players to pick up the 2 additional points from their defensive actions, clearances, blocks, interceptions and tackles. Remember, it's different for defenders compared to midfielders and forwards. So in the case of defenders, they need 10 defensive actions, and for midfielders and forwards, it's 12. So in Liverpool's 2-0 win yesterday, Gravenberch picked up maximum bonus, Salah got 2 and Robertson got 1. For DEFCON, Konate was the only Liverpool player and the only player in that match to secure DEFCON. He got 8 points overall. And West Ham got a massive win today over Newcastle, and the bonus points will be awarded to Lucas Paqueta, Jacob Murphy, and also Thomas Soucek and Matheus Fernandes will share 1 apiece. Todibo, Potts, Wan-Bissaka are the only players that secured DEFCON. And the final match that we've actually seen take place, of course, there's 1 remaining tomorrow, is Man City's 3-1 win. Cherki got 2 assists, Haaland with the brace, and O'Reilly killed the game off. So, yeah, what a surprise. Erling Haaland got maximum bonus points. Yeah, what is wet. Cherki got 2, and Adams got 1. He also was subbed off with an injury. That could be massive for Bournemouth if it turns out to be serious. I don't think it was anything particularly long-term. It looked like a knock, but just bear in mind that it could have repercussions for Senesi and even Antoine Semenyo because he is arguably Bournemouth's most important player, Tyler Adams. So Nico Gonzalez, Senesi and Truffert were the only 3 players to secure DEFCON, and that wraps up things in terms of the, bonus points, DEFCON analysis and other bits and bobs from the games that took place in match day 10. Let me now go back to my FPL squad. So as you can see, it's a decent week for me so far, 82, despite a horrendous bench boost. It could be salvaged somewhat with a clean sheet from Renildo Mandava, but yeah, Reinders was benched 1 point. Dan Burn conceded twice, 1 point. Dubravka also conceded twice against Arsenal, got a save point, but yeah, ultimately it's a very, very poor bench boost. I mean, I was considering benching Lacroix anyway, so it If I didn't bench boost, there is a possibility I would have had Lacroix's 8 points on my bench. So ultimately, I'm not really looking too much into it. It is what it is, and at least it's a good week for me. And only game week 9 was a bit of a blip over the last month or so. So let's get back into your questions. Drop a like, also subscribe, all that good stuff. We are closing in on 37 subscribers, and by Tuesday's deadline, that is the aim. We're going to reach that goal, all thanks to your support. Let's also grow my social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky. You can find me by typing FPL Dylan or Dylan RCM for the updates on UCL Fantasy and FPL. Hit the notification bell on YouTube, click the join button to become a member, and the same goes for patreon.com/FPL Dylan for early access to my videos, prior to comments, and many other perks. You will see how useful it is in the deadline stream on Tuesday because there are so many questions and you will always be answered as a member or patron. Should I do a -8 to get Mateta? It depends on the context. Who are you selling? And if you don't take the hit to get Mateta, who would line up? How are things going to change with Mateta coming in? Do you bench someone who's a pretty decent option for Game Week 11? So as things stand, I'd say no, because you might have a good option, but I need the context. Yes, Mateta always scores versus Brighton, says the dog. Yeah, but then again, he never scored against Brentford or assisted in his career until yesterday. Things can change. How many points Haaland provided overall since his debut in FPL? I haven't counted, but a lot. Hundreds. Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, we could do a quick calculation now, but yeah, it's going to be off the cuff. So it's 13 points today. So, yeah, I'll add the 3 on top of it. So Haaland, let's just do this quickly. Okay, so Erling Haaland has 683 FPL points, and this is his 4th season. So, yeah, incredible. That's why it costs the big bucks. And he's the most expensive player in the game once more. Voltamada replacement, 0 in the bank, 1 free transfer. This is the thing. Just because he was subbed off for half-time and Newcastle were terrible today, it doesn't mean Voltamada's a sell. If you really want to sell him, then you can go to Igor Thiago or Welbeck, but I think that's a bit premature. Yeah, Bowen's assist being chalked off, it's a bit strange. When I saw the goal, the 3rd goal that went in for West Ham, I was convinced that Bowen would get the FPL assist, but it's about intention, right? I covered the rules at the beginning of the season in a key changes to FPL guide, and yeah, one of the big talking points and also one of the kind of key factors in assists is about the intention in terms of the pass and stuff like that, so that's probably why it wasn't awarded. Liverpool finally won a Premier League game. Yeah, I mean, come on, Mr. Premier League champions, you've got to put up a better defence than that. I took a -20 hit, had used all my chips, team needed some important changes. Well, that's fair enough. I mean, I don't like -20 hits. I used to do that when I played casually, and it rarely went well. But there are examples of massive hits being taken and a good score, or you fix a lot of problems over the coming weeks. Bench Anderson or Senesi next week. To be fair, I didn't expect Fulham to keep a clean sheet this week, but they did. I think the red card also helped a lot. But next week, it's actually a close one. Like, it wouldn't completely surprise me if Anderson got a return against Everton, but yeah, it's probably going to be Joachim Anderson, to be fair. Was really impressed with West Ham on the whole today. Bowen hit the post, nearly won a pen, and nearly got a delayed assist. Yeah, the penalty wasn't a penalty for me. It's the correct decision by the referee. You know, I don't like referees or officials for the most part, but I think that decision was correct. Yeah, the post, obviously, that was early on in the game. The late assist, of course, a bit of contention around that, but yeah, I'm quite surprised by Bowen blanking. For West Ham to win 3-1 and for Bowen not to get any goals or assists is quite staggering. Enzo worth keeping or move to Menta? He's worth keeping. I'm on bench boost 2, 87 points. Ballard, McKillian and Dye to play. Well, it's possible. I mean, your best chance is a Sunderland clean sheet because, well, to be fair, if Ndai gets a goal and the others just get appearance points, you could also get to 100. So I think, yeah, you're in a decent position. 100 is certainly attainable, but if you get like 95 or something, it's nothing worth crying about. Hi, Dylan, a different spelling of my name, but thank you. Would you sell Gyökeres and Diouf to Gabriel Mateta for a hit? I still like Gyökeres, and I've said that repeatedly. I know he hasn't been consistent in the Premier League, but that was a great performance yesterday against Burnley. I know the opposition, but we've seen some top teams struggle against the Clarets this season. I personally would do it just because you're getting Gabriel, the best defender in the game, and Mateta has incredible underlying numbers. I would do it, but I still like Gyökeres. Should I do Gyökeres, Rangers to Mateta, Rice, and take the -4? I would only sell Gyökeres if you need that to fund Rangers to Rice. If you can just get Rice for free, I would do that instead. Swedish, Bas Dost dodging the Stadium of Light test. No one said he's missing out though. I don't think he will. And I think Gyökeres can score against Sunderland, but let's see if he's fit. Anachronism says, Ryan, Dubravka, Munoz, Gabriel, Senesi, Michele, Goodmanson, Saka, Mbumo, Indai, Semenyo, Stack, Haaland, Mateta, Thiago, 0.4 in the bank, 1 free transfer. Suggest my future Gameweek moves. I think your defensive line is just about fine, but for everyone who has 2 4 million defenders, I always advise having only one of them and then upgrading your 4th defender, but that's just my take on it. I'll be honest with you. I know you're saying future moves, but I think the best thing to do now is roll, have 2 free transfers and more flexibility going into Game Week 12, especially if you don't have the wildcard still, or as in if you've used the wildcard already. So Gabriel captain was a brilliant decision. Shame Haaland had to outscore by 1 point. Pope on the wildcard was a horrible decision. Richards over Gabe punishing 2. Well, Pope was actually having a great start to the season. Even when Newcastle were near the bottom of the table, they were keeping plenty of clean sheets, particularly at home. Even in away matches, they got 0-0 draws against Leeds and Bournemouth. But yeah, Nick Pope and Dan Burn, who I bought 2 weeks ago, they've been very catastrophic recently. There's no denying it. And that's why in most of my wildcard videos, I've got David Raya as my recommendation. Just go for the Arsenal defence, cover that every single week, even in tough fixtures. Just play Raya and get some points there. Richards over Gay punishing 2. Yeah, I'm quite surprised by Gay this season. In terms of DEFCON, I still think it's quite level, quite even between those two. But Gay's got the attacking threat as well, winning penalties, getting the odd goal or assist from a set piece as well. 1 week punt before our wildcard in Game Week 12. Well, yeah, Joao Pedro as a differential captain could work, but you've also got Enzo Fernandez. I mean, I don't like Pedro Neto as an FPL asset, but against Wolves, that could be an option. Just bear in mind they've got a new manager now, or they will get a new manager after the dismissal earlier. I'm pretty sure you could find someone else, though, not just Chelsea players as a 1 week punt. So I would be tempted to say Jarrod Bowen against Burnley. Despite the fact he blanked today, he was very lively. West Ham, even when they went 1-0 down, I felt they were playing some good football and they deserved to win. So I'd say Jarrod Bowen would be a great differential 1 week punt before you wildcard. Gyökeres and Semenyo to Thiago and Saka, 2 free transfers. I still like Semenyo and Gyökeres, to be honest, mate. I would say no. I wouldn't do that. If Gyökeres is ruled out, you could do Gyökeres to Mateta or, you know, I mean, it all depends, right? Because you might have a decent player on the bench, like midfielder or defender. You could just start him. And also with forwards, I don't think there are many standouts. You know, Joao Pedro, despite blanking 5 times in a row, he's still second in terms of FPL points. I'd keep what you've got. Thinking of bringing in Salah and Van Dijk in 12. Thoughts? Their fixtures turn for the better there. I understand that. I'm more keen on Salah, even though he's more expensive. So it's harder to get Salah and Haaland and still have a balanced team. I would only go for the Egyptian if you are not making massive compromises elsewhere. Otherwise, I'd rather have the more balanced team, you know, having more consistent options. And I saw someone the other day, he was asking, when should I sell Salah and stuff like that, or should I keep him? And he told me his team, I think it was yesterday, and I just looked at it and thought, you've got like 3-4 million defenders, you've got like a budget midfielder like a Sugu, and you've got so many different players who just aren't good enough. And I thought in that case, just sell Salah. And I stand by that. But yeah, I think 1 or 2 Liverpool players from Game Week 12 onwards is fine. Just ensure that if you go for Salah, that you've still got a very solid team in general. Right, Dubravka, Gabriel, Gay, Senesi, Van de Ven, Alderete, Sar, Saka, Semenyo, Ndai, Caicedo, Haaland, Joao Pedro, Voltemada. So yeah, the front line is still fine. Despite Voltemada's, 1-pointer today, he's still a hold. The players that I'd kind of highlight as sells are Van de Ven And that's probably it. He's the clear sell for me. The rest is fine, you can roll. But if you were to make a move, it would be Van der Ven out. Thank you very much, Ellis. It's going well so far. Yeah, I think 90 is attainable with 2 players left, but I mean, people will just say, oh, you bench boosted, you got like 5 points there, mate. Yeah, it's terrible, I know that, but we'll see what Ranilo can do tomorrow. Gary O'Neill, Rob Edwards, and Carrick are options for the Wolves job. Yeah, I saw David Ornstein's tweet. I think Gary O'Neill is the front runner, but yeah, the less said about that, the better. I mean, he did some good things at Wolves at one point, but it just seems a bit strange going back to him. Yeah, thank you very much, Goldhead. As he says, like the stream. Hey, Dylan, well done on going Tim instead of Raya this week. Yeah, but ultimately, I'll be honest, I like Raya long-term. He is my second favourite way of covering the Arsenal defence, with Gabriel always being number 1. I've said that from the beginning. And yeah, I just looked at the Chelsea-Tottenham game, and I thought if there was a winner, I think Chelsea are more likely. You also look at the next 3 or 4 fixtures. Chelsea have better fixtures. They're also top of the FDR until Game Week 16, while Spurs are near the bottom. So I weighed all of that up. Also, the fact that I don't like making goalkeeper transfers, and that's why I went for Timber in the end. But if I wildcard in 13, I'll probably bring Raya in. Thank you, FPL Kevy. Dylan answers almost all comments. Understand it gets busy, but he's here for a few hours. Chill with multiple comments in a row. Give others a chance to get answered also. I think that's perfectly summed up. I always try my best to answer every single question, and sometimes, just watch on Tuesday for UCL Fantasy, there'll be double, triple, quadruple the amount that we're getting now, but if you are patient, your question will be answered, and yeah, that's, I think FPL Kevy summed it up perfectly. Wildcard, free Arsenal defence, Haaland and Mateta, Salah, Sarr, Ndiaye, Paqueta, Caicedo. Thoughts? Cheers, Dylan. Yeah, look, I'm still going to say this. A triple Arsenal defence is fine, but there are some tough fixtures like Chelsea and Tottenham coming up soon, even though I'd expect Arsenal to win those games or get positive results and still be, you know, in a really good run. I think the clean sheets will dry up a little bit. You know, they've gone an entire month without conceding, over 1,000 minutes. That's not always going to last, right? As good as their defence is. I would go for a double up personally in Arsenal's defence and then leave that spot open for one of Saka or Gyökeres, even Declan Rice, who I've been bigging up in this stream, and he deserves a lot of credit. He's one of the best midfielders in the Premier League, and in FPL, he is also getting those points. But yeah, it's really good on paper what you're saying. I don't disagree with anyone in particular. Even Paqueta, who's on penalties, he scored a brilliant goal today from distance. I think Nick Pope should have done better though, but yeah, I like the team in general. You do have like 4 mid-price midfielders, all at 6.6 and below. So that could cause an imbalance. Obviously, you've got Salah as well, but you might miss out on opportunities like Saka, Cole Palmer when he's back from injury next month, Bruno Fernandes and Bumo. Just be wary about that, but I like the midfielders you've picked. And even with the 3 Arsenal defenders, that could include Raya in goal. I think that looks very sensible. But in my opinion anyway, if you are set on tripling up on Arsenal defensively, I would go for Raya and 2 defenders, not 3 defenders out of the 5 spots. I think that's the best advice I can give there. Sell Voltemade as Joao Pedro? No. I wouldn't do that. I know he's got great fixtures for the next 2. What was encouraging about Joao Pedro was the amount of chances he had against Tottenham, but he should have got 2 or 3 goals. He missed some big opportunities. But literally last week, everyone was looking to sell Joao Pedro to a Voltemade or Mateta. Yeah, I think, you'd be chasing points there. And by game week 13, 14, you might not want Joao Pedro anymore anyway. I should be a pilot for red arrows. I'm great at achieving them. It can feel like that sometimes, Andrew. I had a spell like that earlier this season, and last season was a disaster, but there you go. I almost changed Bruno to Mbeumo. I checked the XG plus A, Bruno ahead of Mbeumo. Well, I said this before, even in yesterday's stream, you can feel free to watch it back. I said this could be the week where Bruno's the one getting the points and Mbeumo blanks, right? If I was wildcarding, I would pick Mbeumo because from open play, he's got the bigger goal threat. And he's also taking some set pieces like the corners and stuff. But Bruno Fernandes is on free kicks, penalties, he can get DEFCON, and his underlying numbers are still very high. If he scored those penalties against Brentford and Fulham, I think we'd be talking about Bruno Fernandes very differently. I don't think it's time to get rid of Enzo Fernandez. The next 2 fixtures are great. If you've got a Chelsea player that is poised to start, like Enzo Fernandez, Joao Pedro, Reece James, they're all holds. Even Chalobah and Cucurella, they're all worth holding on to until Game Week 13. 84 points, 88 minus 4, and Ndiaye to play. Yeah, decent stuff. I sold Gyökeres, Caicedo and Tarkowski for Mateta, Rice and Munoz. Yeah, that went well in the end. I know Gyökeres and Caicedo returned. We'll see how Tarkowski fares tomorrow, but the three players you brought in, I think it's a better trio overall. I'm quite surprised you did Caicedo to Rice. I don't think you were wrong about that necessarily, but I didn't see that as like a priority transfer, but you gained 3 points from it, so not too shabby. And even with Gyökeres, who was outstanding yesterday in the first half, because of that early substitution, you gained the point with Jean-Philippe Mateta. So all in all, very well played. Is it worth transferring out Donnarumma for Raya? Yes, I think so. I'd go for Raya. And almost buying Timber, but already had Gabriel, so I go to Rice, and I'm very happy at least for this game week. One more place for Arsenal player, Raya or Timber. Long term, I'd pick Raya. I've been very consistent about that. Also, a few minutes ago, I alluded to it. If you are doubling or tripling up on the Arsenal defence, my preference is to have Raya and Gabriel. And then if you are tripling up, then go for Timber. I think it's also a question of structure. 70 with Ndiaye to go, pretty decent red so far. Yeah, good score, but this week is very competitive, and it also depends on the rank you're at. 77 points so far, just a small green arrow. FPL is hard. Yeah, it is. It's very competitive. And once again, it depends on where you're at. If you're in like the top 300k, 77, 80 might not be enough for that significant green arrow. Sell Foden for who? I don't know who you've got, so very difficult for me to say, but I still like Mbumo, Bukayo Saka, Ismail Assar, Enzo Fernandez, Ndiaye, Minta. So just let me know who you've got and then I can give you an answer. Jump the gun with my free transfer next week already. Burn out, Timber in. Double up in Newcastle defence really not working. Need Enzo to turn up for the next 2 games. Yeah, I think Enzo will. In one of those matches, he should return. And whenever he does, he's got a great chance of bonus points. Double Newcastle defence did well at the beginning of the season, but I always said this. I would only go for one. The only team worth doubling or tripling up on defensively is Arsenal. Eze out for Rice. I'm not actually against that, to be fair. I think Rice is just... He's so consistent. With Eze, he is a match winner. And when he does score, he can get maximum bonus. But I think Rice will be more consistent. I'm at 59 points overall. Yeah, look, it's not a terrible score, but this week, that might not be enough. Haaland is a different level of striker that every team wants. Well, the thing is, there is still Harry Kane, Kylian Mbappe. If we're talking about the Premier League alone, Haaland is the best. There's no denying that, and by quite some distance now. There were debates about Isak last season. Of course, that's kind of put to bed this time round, and we'll see if he can turn things around at Liverpool. I think he will. But yeah, in the Premier League, there's no competition. If Enzo is sold soon, I think I'd have the budget after all those transfers. Would you bring in Bruno Fernandes, Foden, Guimaraes or Mbeumo? It's still Mbeumo for me, but Bruno's not too far behind. That's Bruno Fernandes, of course. Guimaraes is quite solid. I'd rank him higher than Foden. But yeah, a United midfielder is my preference. Welbeck or Thiago? It's still Thiago for me. I think the best time to have bought Welbeck was actually last week against Leeds. I'd go for Thiago. I'm on 73 with Mukiele and Tarkowski to play. A 0-0 will be perfect for you. Or maybe a 1-1 and both of them score. Who knows? But yeah, that would be asking for a lot. Should I get rid of Voltemada and get Joao Pedro or Bowen? I would keep Voltemada. Anthony and Minta or Rice and Caicedo? Rice and Caicedo. I did get 68 points, quite happy considering Enzo, Voltemada, Eze, Burn, Pope all let me down. Yeah, once again, it's not a terrible score, but yeah, that's a lot of players who kind of let you down there, as you say. It is quite disappointing. Do you like double game weeks? Well, I do like double game weeks, yeah. The only problem with them is, especially in the second half of the season, we'll find that out very soon, it becomes a bit template. So right now, we're getting different chip strategies. I'm bench boosting. Some of you might be wildcarding or triple captaining. And by the time you get to Game Week 31 to 36 maybe, I think most of us will have a very defined chip strategy. So that's the kind of downside to double game weeks, but it is exciting. And you're more likely to get big returns from your chips there. Bench boost, triple captain, etc. Just seen world #1 captain Rice for 26 points and had Semenyo Fer on the bench. Well, look, fair play to him. That's a very bold call. It worked out very well. And Declan Rice is fixture-proof anyway. But against Burnley away, for him to score the second goal, get maximum bonus points, yeah, I mean, it's just a great all-round decision. Voltemada to Joao Pedro. No, I'm going to say the same thing. I don't think Voltamata was injured. I will check now for Eddie Howe's conference, but I'm not so sure. Let's see if I can get the latest updates. Obviously, I did that for Victor Gyökeres earlier. So now let's do it for Eddie Howe and Nick Voltamata. I don't see anything at the moment. Let's see if there's an injury. It was very surprising to me. Also, Anthony Gordon. I just assumed that, you know, they were 2-1 down, Eddie Howe lost it, and he just made a triple change. I don't think it was an injury. But yeah, if I'm wrong about that, correct me in the live chat. Yeah, I just don't see anything. I'm just seeing Newcastle fans complain about the decision, and I don't blame them. Okay, so let's go for a few more. I still have triple captain. There is a deadline to use, not to lose it. Yeah, look, everyone's got a triple captain, bench boost, wildcard, and free hit for the first half of the season. So you've got to use these for the first 19 game weeks. Then, when you get to game week 20, you can use the chip again, but that will be for the second half of the season. So basically, you have until game week 19. That is the last game week where you can use these chips. Make sure to use all of them. Triple Arsenal defense is not a bad thing. I never said it was. I've actually been warming up to it with each clean sheet that's been kept. The underlying numbers are superb. I just prefer double up still long term. And also when you come up against Chelsea and Tottenham, Arsenal could concede in those games even if they win them. And I think there is space for a Rice, Saka or Gyökeres. Should I do Salah, Gyökeres, and Borro to Haaland, Mbeumo and Timber for a -4? Only bad thing is that he is he'll be doing a triple Arsenal defense. I mean, you're considering a lot of things, Jubert. At the beginning of the stream, you said one thing, then a few messages later, you said something else. And I think they're all viable options, to be honest. But at the moment, I think the second thing you suggested is the one I'd recommend. But now I've got to go all the way back to that message and kind of reiterate it to you. But the second set of transfers you talked about is what I'd recommend. And it's something I even offered as a possibility when I read your first comment. Voltamata to Joao Pedro, yes or no? I've said it many, many times in the stream. For me, it's a no. Damn, your FPL challenge went good. I had Pope in my goal and Mbeumo blanked. Well, Mbeumo blanked for me, but it is what it is. India won the Women's Cricket World Cup today. I wasn't aware. I'll be honest, I don't follow cricket at all. I actually wasn't aware about women's cricket either, but fair play. Feels like BBC's final score at 4 PM on a Sunday. Look, once again, mate, it's the approach I've got. It is what it is. I'm not really going to change it. And also, it's not a deadline stream, so I'm just going to answer questions and stuff in order of submission. It would be unfair if I just skip them just to go all the way to the front when there's not really any rush. And it is what it is, right? Captain Semenyo, 200 to 450k now. Still a great position to be in, though. I think at this stage of the season, it's a very good rank. Look, I thought Semenyo could do something against Man City, but I was always quite concerned about Bournemouth's record at the Etihad. They just don't win there. It's as simple as that. But yeah, captaining him was quite bold. He wasn't even in my top 10 captains. And in recent weeks, I've been talking about vice-captaining Semenyo or even captaining him, but that was never the case this week. No boring bit of rain and they come off, says Andrew. Through all my budget to buying Saka for the next few weeks. Lame situation, regretting big time. Anyways, I got Welbeck, Voltamata and Haaland. Would you recommend I bring Mateta in or stay with WB? I do prefer Mateta, so if you can make that upgrade, I'd recommend it. And I understand people who want to do Voltamata to Mateta, but to go to Joao Pedro now, yeah, it might look good for the next two fixtures, but I think he'd still be inconsistent. And it's only the game against Tottenham where Joao Pedro had shots and looked threatening. In all the other games, he wasn't even taking any shots whatsoever. So with Mateta, it's different. I think he's worth purchasing. But then again, I got questions yesterday about, should I sell Gyökeres to Mateta for a -4? And I said no. In the end, I think that was the right call. But everyone's situation is different. I would bring in Mateta if you can. But it's not an absolute priority. You have to do it or you'll go down in rank and stuff like that because you've got a good forward line. If Gary O'Neill was hired as the new Wolves coach, how would the team lineup be? I'd have to do more research again because he predominantly played a back three. And, of course, you can refer back to some of his, last lineups as a Wolves manager, potentially. But I think he'd go to a back three on a consistent basis. Get Mick McCarthy back at Wolves. I'm sure he'll give them some choice words. It can't get any worse, can it? Well, it can. Considering selling Voltemada to bring Mateta and keep Welbeck for a few weeks. That's understandable. I'm not completely against that, and I think today raised some serious alarm bells about Voltemada and Newcastle players, particularly those doubling up on the defence. So I understand, but I don't think Voltemada is a clear sell. Anish puts his team. He puts Raya, Gabriel, Senesi, Chalobah, Mbumo, Eze, Sarr, Semenyo, Caicedo, Haaland, Joao Pedro, Dubravka, Voltemada, Van Dijk, Goodmanson. I still think Voltemada is worth starting, especially in home fixtures. But of course, with the halftime sub today, I don't blame people for, getting a little bit nervous. Of course, it's Brentford away next. So if you were ever to bench him, I think away games might be the way to go. Obviously, he scored against Brighton at the Amex, got 8 points, but I think Newcastle just struggled to create chances and build consistency in away matches. So oddly enough, Voltemada might be better in Gameweek 12 when he faces Man City. So I get why you've done that. So looking at your starting 11 again, I think it's probably just about right. Yeah, your defense is good with Gabriel and Chalobah, and obviously Raya is the best goalkeeper in the game. Senesi lets it down a little bit, but he can get DEFCON still, despite a recent drop-off there. And overall, I probably agree with your starting 11. Maybe there's a case to start Voltemada over Eze or Caicedo, but in the case of Caicedo, he has been very consistent this season. Thank you, Ayub. Is Gordon worth a sell now? Well, if you check out my recent transfer tips video, I said he's a skip. I've never really liked him this season. I thought going into Game Week 2, before he got sent off against Liverpool, I thought he could be a nice punt, especially starting up front in certain games, and he has been brilliant in the Champions League. I will talk about him in UCL Fantasy, but in this competition, yeah, he's not worth going for, to be quite honest with you. Did Eddie Howe make a mistake to sub off Voltemada? I think so. But then again, look, there are many things to consider when you make a decision. Match sharpness, rotation, the schedule. Voltemada might have been in the red zone. Maybe a physio or, the doctors would tell him, if you play Voltemada more, there's a risk of him getting injured. We just don't know the full context. But if you just base it purely off performances, Newcastle's problem was creativity. West Ham had the bulk of the chances. They looked the most threatening. They deserved to win the game. And Newcastle didn't give Voltemada enough service, so he was ineffective in the match. Emma O'Connell says, Pope, Dubravka, Gabriel, Timber, Richards, Burns, Senesi, Sarr, Semenyo, Saka, Enzo, and Boomer, Voltemada, Haaland, Foster. One free transfer, but willing to take a -8. Well, if you got a wild card and you have the feeling that you're willing to take a -4, -8, you could consider that, but I don't think you need to. So you've got a double up in the Newcastle defense, which frankly isn't doing it. Gabriel and Timber, though, absolutely fine. Richards might not be the best Palace defender, but he offers good value at 4.5 million. Senesi is still one of the best defenders after Gameweek 11. Your midfield looks very solid. And Voltemada and Haaland is great. Lau Foster maybe not so much, despite a decent start to the campaign. But yeah, I think the players I'd kind of highlight as sells would be Burn, Foster, and that's probably about it. I think the rest is... I wouldn't be in a rush to sell the rest, let's put it that way. Haven't got enough for Timber. Is Calafiori still good? He's still good. There's not a massive difference between the two. I just think Timber will offer more attacking threat, a little bit more nailed on as well. Obviously, Ben White and Skelly, even Hincapié, will offer good competition in those fullback areas, but Timber's my third favourite Arsenal defensive coverage, my second favourite Arsenal defender. So to be clear, Gabriel is number 1, Raya second, and I would put Timber in third. What player do you regret transferring in so far? In recent weeks, things have been going well, but probably Dan Burn. Yeah. I have 2 free transfers. I want to sell 2 from these, Grealish, Van de Ven, and Reinders. Who do I replace them with? Well, over the last couple of weeks, actually, I talked about selling these players. So with Van de Ven, those that held until Everton, very well played. I did that with Borro. Then I sold against Chelsea. So sometimes you've got to just, cut these off and just move on, because you can be carried away by last week's points. Some people will buy these players in and chase, what happened last week. And then you look at the upcoming fixtures, Tottenham's home record and stuff like that. I think that all sells, to be quite honest with you. If I had to just pick one to keep for now, it's probably Grealish. But he's not going to get you many goals. 0 money in the bank, by the way. Yeah, difficult, right? You could do something like Van de Ven to... This is my problem, though. Because if you went to a cheap defender like 4 million, you could then do Rangers to, let's say, Caicedo or Rice or something like that. But I don't recommend having 2 4 million defenders, or even 3 in some cases. I think that's way too much. So despite the fact that I think Grealish is better than Reinders, because you've only got 0 in the bank, I'd probably recommend selling Grealish, because then you've got a lot of choices. Ismail Assar, Enzo Fernandez, Ndai, Minta, Caicedo, Declan Rice. So I think it's probably worth selling Grealish in your situation. That's why context is important, and I appreciate you put your money in the bank. Would you take a -4 hit to put Rice in for Saka? No. Thoughts on Semenyo? He doesn't seem that lethal right now. He did overperform at the beginning of the season, and I pointed this out, but he is still offering, or he still offered, consistency up until the last 2 or 3 matches. So I still think he's worth holding on to. Let's not forget that Bournemouth had a relatively tough fixture run recently, facing Crystal Palace. Nottingham Forest was still a decent fixture. Semenyo blanked. Man City away, that just went by. And there is Aston Villa away next. But then you've got some promising games on paper. So I think Semenyo is a hold. For those that don't have Semenyo, I wouldn't be buying him. Hi, Dylan. How do you think the Palace-Brighton game will go? I have 5 assets. Well, that's a derby. They hate each other. I went to the Arsenal game against Brighton. Obviously, we just played Crystal Palace a few days before. Anytime Eze got the ball, Brighton fans are just booing him. They absolutely hate Palace. When we scored, we said, you're just a shit Crystal Palace. Yeah, look, for me, difficult game to predict. I think Palace are the better team. They're more consistent, but I think both of them are kind of culpable of beating the better and bigger teams. So they kind of thrive of being underdogs. And when they're facing a low or mid block, they do struggle a bit to break them down. So should be an interesting game. I think it'll be quite open and high scoring. That's my prediction. I think 2-1, maybe 2-2 would be my current sort of guess. But just keep your eyes peeled for future videos, because you will see my scoreline predictions for Gameweek 11 in a couple of days. Salah's points gave me a massive rank boost. Glad I kept him. I mean, that's fair enough, but it's not just about Salah getting 10 points. What about the rest of your squad? Does having Salah mean you've got 3-4 million defenders and you've got a budget midfielder and something like this, which someone told me yesterday? I believe it was Ahmed. So these things are also very important to bear in mind. What do you expect from Ndai tomorrow? To be honest, I expect one return from either him or Mukiele. So either a Sunderland clean sheet or Ndai getting an attacking return. In an ideal world, I'll get DEFCON from both. I'll get maybe a clean sheet. Something like that. I mean, look, I'm obviously expecting a lot, right, to reach 100 points. It's possible, but quite unlikely. If I can get to 90, I think that'll be a decent week overall. Is Saka a hold? Yeah, he's a hold. I think for those that haven't bought now, I wouldn't be buying him until he shows consistency. I felt it was valid, though, for me to recommend him recently, because we saw him play very well against Fulham. He got 7 points despite not scoring or assisting, and that is the type of performance that you really look at and you think he can build upon this and get a lot of attacking returns against Burnley and all these different fixtures, but it just hasn't happened, right? Obviously, he scored against West Ham the week before that, and it was a penalty. But I think Gyökeres will take the next one, and it all depends on the context of the situation of the game. And also, is Gyökeres in a goal drought, which is not the case any longer. But Saka is a hold, that's for sure. Arthur says 78 points and Ndai to play, 1.5 million rank and 1 free transfer. Considering wildcard 12 to 13, even though the team is strong. Maybe time for Liverpool, United, Man City assets. Also, maybe bench boost in 11 with double Burnley defence, Van de Ven, King. Thoughts? Yeah, wildcard 12 is becoming a strong possibility for me, and that's where you can go in early on Liverpool assets. For some people, it will be Salah. If Isak is out for a while, you can go for Ekitike, and Virgil van Dijk is still going to give you DEFCONs regularly, despite being quite disappointing yesterday. But yeah, I think that's a good plan. I also feel very similarly, where my team is looking decent on the whole, but it could be improved upon, and you can be early on certain teams and fixtures. Obviously, you highlight Liverpool, United, and City by wildcarding in 12 or 13. So overall, I agree with your assessment. Good score for you. Ndai to play. Hopefully, for both of us, he does get a return. I need a striker to replace Richarlison. Depends on your budget, mate. Ideally, it's Mateta. If you can't afford that, I'd stick to one of Igor, Thiago, or Welbeck, with Thiago being my preference still. 65 -4 of Mukiele to go on a 6-point red arrow. Yeah, quite disappointing. I mean, it's not a terrible score, but this week has been very competitive. So, unlucky bench boost, man. Yeah, but as I described before, if I didn't bench boost this week, there's a real possibility I would have benched Lacroix. So I'm not really looking at it negatively. I've still got Renildo left. If he gets a clean sheet, then that's, well, not great, but it's 10 points. I'll take it. Obviously, 15 plus was kind of my goal, but in a single game week, you've got to temper your expectations. I think it was a decent bench on paper, but once I saw Reinders on the bench and obviously Dan Duncan sitting twice, I knew it wasn't going to go too well. On the web version, there's currently no way to change captain. Why is this? You might need to reload the page. I'm not sure why that would be the case. Over the next few weeks, I've got to do something different, sell Saka, get more differentials, etc. I know things can change at some point, but this game is getting dull. What is the point of the captain feature if it's the same outcome every week? This is the thing, though. People have said this before with Salah last season, with Haaland when he first joined the Premier League. I think it's typical from FPL. We might have rose-tinted glasses when looking at the past, not just for FPL, but just in general, but I understand that. If we had other premiums, might need the water break, to like rival Haaland for the consistency and the sheer output, like Salah, Palmer, Saka, it wouldn't be a concern. Even last season when Haaland, was on fire for the first 5 game weeks, you had Watkins, you had all these players I just mentioned who were doing really well. So you had different strategies. I agree with you. I even tweeted out as well today. It would be great to see other premiums really rise to the surface and offer consistency, because otherwise we're just going to captain the same player every single time. At least some people went for Gabriel captain, got a good score, but even then they lost out on a point, and obviously even more if they didn't even have Erling Haaland in their setup. Do you reckon Enzo will do well in the upcoming fixtures? Yes, I believe so. Are Arsenal defenders, including goalkeeper, the top defenders from another team? Sorry, I don't understand. Could we pick top defenders from other teams? Is that what you're saying? So could we pick someone else other than Arsenal defenders? Not many. I think Munoz would be a standout, or any Palace defender. That could be Gay, Lacroix, Richards. I wouldn't go for Mitchell personally, but he's not too shabby. There aren't that many, though, that really, I'd say stand out above the rest. Maybe for the next 2, you look at Chelsea, but they're not the most reliable defensively. From Game Week 12 onwards, you could say Virgil van Dijk, but even then, Liverpool aren't looking that solid defensively, despite the clean sheet yesterday. Best Liverpool triple up from Game Week 12, Salah, Ekitike and Van Dijk, but there's also a question of budget. Thank you, DM McDonald. Cheers for answering my questions earlier, Dylan. Much appreciated. No worries, mate. Thank you for staying patient and waiting around. Best Chelsea defender for the next week? Reece James, probably. I think they are the best option in defence for a clean sheet next week versus Wolves. Yeah, look, I think next week, even though Arsenal will probably be top of the clean sheet odds, and you'll see them very soon, I think Chelsea have a better chance on paper. But Wolves have a new manager, and in recent seasons, whether it's Gary O'Neill, Vitor Pereira, whoever it is, Chelsea kind of struggle to keep a clean sheet at home against Wolves. But you look at the situation right now, and I see where you're coming from. But Reece James is my answer. I still like Cucurella. Obviously, Chalobah offers threat from set pieces, but I think Reece James is the one. Best replacement for Kudus? I have Sarr, Semenyo and Ndiaye, or shall I keep Kudus for the United game? Yeah, I mean, there is a case to keep Kudus for the United game, but then it's Arsenal, and ultimately, I think Kudus is a sell. So it depends what your budget is, who you can go to. As a short-term punt, I like Enzo Fernandez up until Game Week 12, or even up until Game Week 16, that could work. There's also Declan Rice, who offers real consistency. Moises Caicedo. I think any of those would be decent. Even Minter, although the Leeds fixture was the most appealing. Haaland, Joao Pedro, Isidore, what do you think? Good front line. I've said this for many weeks now. I know Joao Pedro has only finally returned in Game Week 10, but you definitely keep him for the next 2, then reassess. Isidore is a budget forward, but I don't like Sunderland's fixtures. I'd probably sell him if you can, but it all depends on your situation. You might have other fires to put out, so Isidore can just be your 8th attacker, come in when needed, but Sunderland are near the bottom of the FDR for the next 5 to 6 game weeks, and you could go to Igor Thiago, Danny Welbeck, if you've got enough funds. Gakpo didn't really turn up for me either this week, but definitely think he's worth holding on to. After next week, Liverpool's fixtures look quite good, and Salah being away for AFCON might benefit him. And look, recently Gakpo was doing quite well for club and country. Before his blank against I'm forgetting the games now. Liverpool's match in Game Week 9 against Brentford. He was actually scoring or assisting in 5 consecutive games for the Netherlands and Liverpool. But yeah, I understand that viewpoint. I just made the transfer of Gakpo to Sarr to then fund Timber for Borro. And I also just prefer Sarr in general, right? But yeah, if you still got Gakpo, you can hold on to him. I just think it's a bit inconsistent. And once Isak is back, we could see Gakpo on the bench from time to time. He's the only natural left winger Liverpool really have. And he's a bit of a unique profile, right? He's not like a traditional out-and-out winger per se, but he's more natural than Isak or Ekitike, that's for sure. As I mentioned earlier, my favourite Liverpool triple-up would be Salah, Van Dijk and Ekitike, and that's assuming that Isak is out for a while. Thoughts on getting a triple Arsenal defence from Game Week 14? Yeah, I think by that stage I'd be more keen, but against Sunderland, Tottenham and Chelsea, I mean, look, Arsenal can keep a clean sheet in all of them, but eventually this clean sheet run will come to an end. So yeah, for me, I think Game Week 14 is a nice time to triple up on the Arsenal defence. Now a lot of the clean sheets have gone by, and I think the next 3 fixtures are tough. Just Parky says, with 1 free transfer, I might have to sell Saka and then get a third Arsenal defender asset over the next 2 weeks, rather than Munoz this week and then do the same moves. To be honest, the fact that Mateta got free last week, I should not have risked the Saka pick, although he could have scored. Bournemouth, such a high line. Yeah, but it was still a surprise to see Mateta score that many goals and have even more opportunities to score 5 or 6. Bournemouth were really open in that game, and that's the reason why, after seeing that performance, I just resigned to captaining Haaland again in this fixture in Game Week 10. So it is what it is, right? But I see why you're thinking that, to sell Saka and go triple Arsenal defence, but I personally stick with Saka and go for 2 Arsenal defenders, because that could be your differential. When most people go for a triple up in the Gunners defence and they won't have Saka, people are going to start selling him or just avoiding him. I think he's a big game player. He could do well, not just against Sunderland, but also against Tottenham and Chelsea after the international break. My team sells Richards, Gabriel, Calafiori, Saka, Semenya, Sarr, Ndiaye, Mateta, Haaland, Voltemada. Yeah, the players that stand out as sells is actually Matt Sells in goal. He's the one. I don't like making goalkeeper transfers, but I think that is the weak link in your setup. Is Chow a good option? I just bought him for the sake of clean sheets. I still think a Newcastle defender is viable in the long term, but in recent matches they have been very disappointing. I certainly wouldn't double up on the Toon defensively, but yeah, Chow's been brilliant for Newcastle. Obviously today, I don't think you can highlight any good or great Newcastle performance, but I think Chow is okay as an FPL choice. Nothing spectacular, but he's not a priority sell for me. Cheers, mate, for your help. Good luck for tomorrow. Thank you, Gibbet the Guy. Same to you. And for those that watch UCL Fantasy or are interested playing that game, I will be recording 2 videos tomorrow. The best wildcard squad and my team selection. They'll be posted tomorrow at different stages of the day. And on Tuesday, I'll be going live for the Matchday 4 deadline stream, answering all your questions. What about the Limitless, you might ask? On Friday night, for channel members and patrons, I posted it and gave you early access for 2 whole days. And it was published earlier for all viewers. Yeah, I covered Isidore earlier. Is 91 points with Mukiele to play and playing the bench boost this week good? Yes, I think it is good. How are the 5 free transfers in Game Week 16 for AFCON going to affect your transfer strategy? That is a good question. I'll be honest, at this point I haven't given it too much thought, but I've also got the wild card, right? So my plan right now is to wild card in 12 or 13, get in on Liverpool, City, United, you know, more Palace access maybe, like Mateta and stuff like that. Maybe not early in some cases, but I'll be bringing them in. And I can also sell my Chelsea players and stuff like that. And I can just go about things a little bit differently. So I wildcard in 12 or 13, and then I can roll, ideally, up until Game Week 6. Well, actually, no. Hold up. Okay, let me just completely put a bump to that, because that is wrong. For everyone watching, the best thing to do, and I said this at the beginning of the season in my chip strategy and also in the key changes to FPL video, because everyone gets 5 free transfers in Game Week 16, irrespective of what you've done in the weeks prior, my advice is to use up your transfers and be aggressive. You don't have to take hits, but you can get to just 1 free transfer by Game Week 16, and then you'll have 5 free transfers again. But that could also play a part in people's bench boosts at that stage, for example, and also allow you to be aggressive. But that's my plan right now, to wildcard in 12 or 13. Ideally, I would have done it earlier, but I felt like my team didn't need to wildcard. And in hindsight, I made the right decision, but I always felt that wildcarding in 12 or 13 could be awkward because everyone gets 5 free transfers in 16 anyway. But I think that way, it allows you to not just navigate the Christmas period, but also the long term. So my kind of strategy is going to be to, be aggressive, use up my transfers even after wildcarding, but sometimes making no transfer is the best thing to do. So it's a difficult balancing act. Hopefully I've conveyed this well, and I can talk about this in more detail in future videos. But yeah, my advice to everyone watching is to use up your transfers by Gameweek 16. Thank you very much. I appreciate the kind words. Are you going to roll transfers? Obviously, that was your question beforehand. Saka did play well, had a couple of chances against Burnley. It's just the price. Yeah, I was a bit disappointed by him, though. He had some big opportunities. Gyökeres was the standout in the first half. I think everyone played well, but as usual, Gabriel right up there. Declan Rice was player of the match and well-deserved for me. With a new coach inbound to try help a team from relegation zone, is it hard to buy players against them with the coach that should turn things around? There's always a risk, right? I think if Vitor Pereira was still there, I think Chelsea would have won quite comprehensively, maybe more than 3-0. The scoreline that Fulham got against Wolves in Game Week 10. But yeah, I still think Chelsea should win this game. It would be a disaster, arguably. It would be another frustrating result for Chelsea if they don't get the win here. I've seen some of their fans talk about a title race. If they want to be in a title race, you've got to beat Wolves at home. It doesn't matter if it's Vitor Pereira there, if it's Gary O'Neill, or there's a new manager bounce. You've got to find a way to win that game. But I still think Chelsea will, but they might struggle a little bit more than people expect. I know it's not linked, but this is Champions League Limitless team. Well, I've made a video for the best Limitless team. It was published earlier. Check that out. I think that's a good squad in general. Just be mindful that DeMarco was benched in matchday 3, and Inter Milan could rotate again against Kara Almaty. So it might be worth tuning into the deadline stream because there's the possibility I get the predicted lineup by Sky Sports Italia, and typically they get it spot on. So they've got an inside source with Inter Milan. So once we see that, we can decide which Inter Milan players to buy. And if you're limitlessing or wildcarding, that will be even more relevant, of course. But yeah, looks good on the whole. I mean, Kvaratskhelia is facing Bayern Munich, so I'm not so sure about that, but it's up to you if you want to go there. The same goes for Nuno Mendes. I personally would go for different options over the PSG players, but the rest looks very solid. Should the free hit be held on to? Yeah, as I mentioned before, though, Easy, even yesterday you brought up Game Week 16, the double Game Week and blank Game Week 17. It's looking less likely. If you want to see why, go to my Predicted Lineups podcast. At the beginning of the video, I talk about all the players who are at risk of suspension, and then after that, I talk about blank Game Week 17, and it's looking less likely. I think Crystal Palace will play 4 games in a matter of 8 days. I put Caicedo on the bench. It can happen, right? But Caicedo was obviously a pressing monster for that goal. Xavi Simons and Van de Ven, not good enough for, the goal they conceded. They simply gave up possession too carelessly in their own box. But yeah, Caicedo, just multiple avenues to points. He got DEFCON again. It has been a while since he got that. He can get a few goals, not many assists, but Caicedo is one of the best midfielders in the Premier League and he offers amazing value. He'll probably be 7-8 million next season, maybe even more. I think 7-8 million is probably fair. Should I take out Burger King or take out Five Guys? I mean, I really can't answer that question. This is an FPL thing, but I'm going to say Five Guys. Why not? It's just a 10-man game at the moment. Yeah, from the perspective that Haaland is always the one, standing up for the captaincy. Everyone's going for him. Yeah, that is a bit frustrating. I agree with you there. Okay, so I'm going to go through the member questions first, then go through the rest in order of submission, but I will be wrapping things up fairly soon. I'm going to try to save my voice as well for the 2 videos I'm recording tomorrow for UCL Fantasy. Yeah, Arsenal's fixtures are going to change. I still think they're favourites to win most of them, but there will be a few drop points, goals conceded, and frustrations from time to time. At what point during the season do you stop considering EO in your transfers in order to chase upside? I always try to consider, these factors when building my team, but effective ownership is not the most important thing. It definitely isn't. Ultimately, I bring in players that I think will score the most points. It sounds simple, but for a combination of form, fixtures, their records against the upcoming opponents and stuff like that, their underlying stats, that's where I kind of decide who to buy. And for example, you saw in yesterday's stream, I had like a simple decision. So Gakpo to Sarr to fund another move to optimize my bench boost and my 15-man squad. Do I sell Sanchez to Raya or do I go from Borro to Timber. In the end, as you can see on screen, I went for Timber, kept Sanchez. I gained 4 points from that decision, and it was also based on other factors like my chip strategy, which is yet another thing I take into account. So because I'm planning to wildcard in Game Week 12 or 13, who has better fixtures until that time? Chelsea. So Spurs are near the bottom of the FDR, even up until Game Week 14-15. So I was more inclined, as a result of fixtures, my chip strategy, and a few other bits and bobs. Also the Chelsea-Spurs record. You know, Chelsea have a brilliant record against Tottenham in general. That's why I kept Sanchez and went for Timber. But on a wild card, I would go for Raya in goal and probably sacrifice Timber if I don't triple up on Arsenal defensively. But in terms of EO, sometimes you are tempted to go for differentials just for the sake of it, but I don't think that is the right way to approach Fantasy Premier League. Ndai or Gakpo, who should I start in Game Week 11? Yeah, good question. I'd probably go for Ndai. Yeah, Will still sacked by Southampton, or could be sacked. Wolves have another contender for the coach job. I saw a tweet that he was sacked, I believe. But maybe I read it wrong. Maybe it said he could be sacked. Was it David Ornstein who said it? So I'll have a quick look now. Yeah, Southampton part ways with Will Still. This was almost an hour ago. So yeah, that could be another consideration. But, I mean, if he's struggling with Southampton in the Championship, I know the circumstances are different, but then why would you appoint him for Wolves and you're trying to stay up? I mean, that would be quite bizarre. Other than Gay or someone who will play every week at that point, Palace might be an avoid. Okay, so yeah, your previous message was, don't know about you, Dylan. I know we're a while away yet, but might be worth having a plan in place to take Palace players out in December 6 games in 14 days. Yeah, there could be more rotation there, but Palace will still... Look, we've seen Oliver Glasner, right? He likes to go strong, even in the early rounds of the Carabao Cup. In the Europa Conference League, he went quite strong in that 1-0 loss at home to Larnaca. But, yeah, with that amount of games, the fixture congestion, he has to rotate. Borna Sosa over Mitchell, give Richards the odd rest, and he has to be very, astute with his choices. So that's a good point. But until we get to that stage, and let's not forget we're in November, we've got a lot of games until then. There is an international break, which maybe reduces that a little bit, but I think that becomes a major issue by the time we get to mid to late December. When we get to the early stages, even though rotation is possible, I think if Palace get a win or two in the next Europa Conference League games, they should be in a solid position where they could rotate in that competition instead, go strong against Arsenal in the Carabao Cup and also the Premier League. So, of course, we're talking about things that are going to happen in over a month. So much can happen by then. Injuries, suspensions, and other factors. Maybe blank Game Week 17 actually happens. But as things stand, I don't think that's going to be the case. And I still think it's worth having 1 or 2 Palace assets for the next month. I did say, though, whilst the triple up is viable, I wouldn't go for it personally. Do you think a Salah-Haaland draft could be viable from 12-13? Maybe using players like Rice, Sarr, or Caicedo to make it possible? I really like Mbeumo, Semenyo, or even Saka, though, so I don't know. Yeah, that's a great point, and I think in previous seasons I would have said no, but because of DEFCON and the likes of Rice and Caicedo being so consistent, I think it's genuinely viable. You've also got Minter. Granted, Xhaka is really just there as your 8th attacker, your 5th midfielder to give you DEFCON, 3-4 points every single game. You've also got a few other players there at a similar price tag, but yeah, I think that could work. Ultimately, though, you are restricting yourself. You're not flexible in terms of budget because you can't go to Mbeumo, Fernandes, Saka, Semenyo, and all these other options. Cole Palmer will be back, of course, in the next month or so. So just be very mindful about that. And I think by the time you wildcard into 12 or 13, you'll be influenced by what happens in terms of Game Week 11 and stuff like that. Because if Salah goes off against Man City, you'll be, very bullish about him on the wildcard to bring him in against the likes of West Ham, Nottingham Forest, etc. Those really plum fixtures. But things can change, right? And ultimately, Salah has to offer consistency and rival Haaland for the captaincy to justify a spot in your wildcard team. Until he does that, I'm not so sure, because you could cover Liverpool offensively with Ekitike if Isak is out for a while and consider a different strategy as well. Is Dan Burn a sell since the next 2 games are Brentford and Man City? Well, if you've got enough squad depth defensively, you could just bench him in those matches and then reintroduce him into your starting 11 afterwards. So I don't think Dan Burn is a priority sell, but it is circumstantial. So, for example, if you're wildcarding in Game Week 13 and let's say, for example, you've got enough money to do Dan Burn to Reece James, otherwise you have to start one of Burn, Mukiele, or somebody else. In that situation, I would sell Dan Burn. So that's why context is very important. When are you going to wildcard? And I think ultimately, if you're wildcarding in 13 and you're struggling with your defensive depth, Dan Burn is a sell. Otherwise, you could just hold and bench him for the next 2. Twisted Parky puts his squad. Munoz for Tosin, Bruno for Saka, Gabriel for Van der Ven, or get Rice. I'd rather get Gabriel for Van der Ven. I know he's template. Rice is the bigger differential in terms of effective ownership, but yeah, Gabriel's a massive upgrade on Van der Ven, and you know, he's just getting points every single week. You know, 2 free bonus points every single time. He's getting goals, assists, DEFCON, clean sheets galore. So yeah, Gabriel for me. The other transfers look decent. In fact, they look very good. Bruno Saka is obviously debatable, but you're doing it to get Gabriel and that other Arsenal player, since you've got Raya and Timber already. So yeah, overall, I think that looks really solid. Rice is genuinely an option. I like Declan Rice, but my preference is Gabriel. Who to bring, Minter or Caicedo? I feel like Caicedo will be more defensive and harder to get some points. Well, the next 2 fixtures look great for Chelsea, but oddly enough, that could reduce Caicedo's chances of getting DEFCON, but he's going to score those points in most matches, as we've seen up until now. He had a bit of a dip recently. He was getting close to DEFCON, but not quite enough. But I think long-term is still Caicedo for me. They're both very consistent, though. Minter has more attacking threat from open play, so you can't really go wrong here. Brighton have nice fixtures, but so do Chelsea. They are top of the FDR, as I showed you earlier, and you'll see it in the upcoming deadline stream, but I think Caicedo in the long term is probably the better option. Who replaces Gyökeres next week? He should play. I don't think Gyökeres will miss out. It's a muscle problem, but we do have the game on Tuesday. So when I go live on Tuesday for UCL Fantasy, one of the early kickoffs is Arsenal against Slavia Prague. So we're going to see if Gyökeres is in the starting 11, is he on the bench, or just left out entirely. If it's the latter, then I would be genuinely concerned about him starting against Sunderland in Gameweek 11. But yeah, if Gyökeres doesn't play, it'll be Marino up top. We're back to that again. I mean, I like Marino, by the way, but yeah, it's not exactly great. Martinelli's also injured at the moment. That would be another option, to play him on the left, Trossard up front, or, you know, a few bits and bobs being shifted, but I think Gyökeres will be available, and that's the hope as an Arsenal fan. Hi, Dylan. I saw Virgil to Munoz last week. Good decision, I think, but Liverpool have a great run of fixtures soon. Would you buy anyone from Liverpool? If Isak is out long-term, I think Ekitike is a genuine consideration. If funds are no issue, which is a big if, and also just bear in mind the context of your team, can you buy Salah and not jeopardize other positions? If that's the case, I think Salah is worth considering, and Van Dijk is the best Liverpool defender still, despite the fact that Konate was the one getting DEFCON and 8 points overall. So those are the 3 players I'd highlight. If you have Cody Gakpo, you could hold on to him, but he's not someone I'd be buying in right now. Do you think there's a chance people might go early with a second wildcard in the new year, considering how poor the strikers have been? Yeah, that is a possibility, but we are going to get doubles and blanks from Gameweek 30 onwards, and I think it's very important, if possible, to hold out on the wildcard. And that's why, for those that still have that chip for the first half of the season, wildcarding in 12 or 13, then getting 5 free transfers in 16 will be very helpful in terms of navigating AFCON and setting yourself up for many, many months, not just the Christmas period. So I think it's the best thing to save the second wildcard of the season until after Gameweek 30. That is my current recommendation. I'd highly also urge you to check out my chip strategy guide, where I talk about this in more detail. As in when the transfer window closes early. Yeah, that makes sense. Ultimately, I think we've had plenty of forward options, but no standouts. So at the beginning, we had Joao Pedro, Victor Gyökeres for the first 4 game weeks. Both of them then blanked for 5 consecutive games. Both of them scored, of course, in Game Week 10. Jean-Philippe Mateta. Besides the hat-trick against Bournemouth, and look, I'm not downplaying that. It's really impressive to get a hat-trick against Bournemouth. But, you know, before that, people were saying, oh, Mateta's just not worth it. He's got these amazing stats and he's not scoring. But yeah, you've got those options. You've got Haaland. Voltemade has been very consistent. Obviously, today was disappointing. I think Bowen is still solid. Igor Thiago and Welbeck offer great value. Isidore as well. So I think we've got options, but not many standouts. I think that's the problem. Okay, so what I want to do before going to the member questions again and wrapping things up is showing you my chip strategy slides. A few of these things could be a bit out of date, but of course some of this will kind of clarify your questions. So in Gameweek 16, we will get 5 free transfers. It doesn't matter. you know, what your situation is. If you had 3, 4, 5 transfers anyway, if you had 1, 2, 0, it doesn't matter. Everyone gets 5 free transfers. You also saw in the first slide that for the first half of the season, between Game Weeks 1 to 19, we've got a free hit, bench boost, triple captain, and wildcard. And the same goes for the second half of the season, which starts in Game Week 20. So if you don't use your chips, by the time we get to Game Week 20, you'll then be using your second half of the season chip instead, and you will basically burn the first one. So these are the potential doubles and blanks for the second half of the season. So blank Game Week 31, a clash with the Carabao Cup final will cause a blank. The 2 finalists and their scheduled opponents will not feature. And for double Game Week 33, teams that blank in Game Week 31 or 34 could double in Game Week 33. And remember, a blank Game Week is when a team does not feature. So obviously, it's not just going to be one team, it's also their scheduled opponent, and it could be more. Sometimes you get 4, 6, or 8 teams blanking. We've had some major blanks in the past. And a double game week is when a team has 2 fixtures within the same game week. And for blank game week 34, similar to last season, the FA Cup semi-finals will take place during game week 34. Clubs that reach this stage will have their fixture postponed and either double in game week 33 or 36, which could be another double game week. So teams that blank in 34 could double in 36. So I'll let this play out. It breaks down every single chip in detail, and ultimately the chip strategy guide covers all of this in a lot of detail. It highlights examples of when to use every single booster, and of course some of these opportunities might have passed by already because I made these graphics several weeks to months ago now. But I want to pause it by the time we get to my recommended chip strategy. So for those that have every single chip remaining, and I've seen I think a question or two either today or yesterday in the streams, I can offer you my opinion once again. So for the first half of the season, obviously I triple captain Haaland in Game Week 6. It was a massive success. My original plan was to wildcard in Game Week 8, but because my team was strong and it was performing very consistently, and I've got, 4, maybe 5 green arrows out of the last 6 game weeks, I felt like holding it out until Game Week 12, 13 is the right decision. So the free hit in Game Week 11 is a possibility, but of course, for those of you that are convinced of Crystal Palace, Arsenal, Everton, Leeds blanking in 17 and doubling in 16 in the case of Arsenal and Everton, it might be worth holding on to the free hit if you believe that's going to be the case. But according to Ben Crellin, and also you look at Dale Johnson from the BBC and what he said about the fixture schedule, it looks less likely now that Palace will have the fixture rescheduled. So they'll just play 4 games in 8 days, and we're not going to get blank Game Week 17 or double Game Week 16, pardon my bomber clot, if you want to say that. For the second half of the season, I would recommend something like this. It's not set in stone completely, but it's a bit more, I'd say, settled compared to the first half of the campaign. So wildcard around Game Week 32, bench boost in double Game Week 33, free hit in blank Game Week 34, and triple captain in double Game Week 36. But those are interchangeable. You might want to consider bench boosting in double Game Week 36 and also triple captaining in double Game Week 33, as you can see. But I also provided alternative weeks for the first half of the season. So if you haven't triple captained yet, I would say Game Week 13 on Erling Haaland against Leeds United. And if that's the case and you've also got the wild card, I would say Game Week 12 would be a great opportunity to use the wild card. Otherwise, if you're happy with your Game Week 12 team and you're not triple captaining Haaland in 13, you could wildcard in, you guessed it, Game Week 13. For the bench boost, I think this is very team dependent, to be honest with you. I used it now in Game Week 10, and if you look at my points on the bench, it doesn't look great, but I kind of see it as a positive because I probably would have benched Lacroix anyway. He got 8 points, and ultimately, it's the weakest chip of the lot. With the free hit as well, there is Game Week 13, 15, and this is also a very team-dependent booster, and I'm not fully settled on when I'm going to use it. It could be Game Week 11, but I'm also quite open to saving it for later on in the first half of the season. But no matter what you do, remember you have to use these chips, or I would urge you to use these chips before Game Week 20, otherwise you will lose them, and basically you will be using up your second half of the season boosters by the time you get to Game Week 20, and I think using all of them will lead to an increase in points. So unless something goes horribly wrong, you will gain points from these boosters, so I'd always encourage you to use them. So for the second half of the season as well, free hit in blank Game Week 34, wildcard in 35, you can also consider something like that as well. So these are all different strategies and also plans that I talk about in my chip strategy guide. Hopefully this has helped you and given you clarification. I'm going to see if I can get the Crystal Palace stuff up I'm not entirely sure. So yeah, these are the graphics I showed you in my predicted lineups. This was before Game Week 10 took place. Ignore the rank and stuff that you see on screen. And this is just a list of the suspension risks on free yellow cards or who were on them. So this was posted by All About FPL. So Crystal Palace versus Arsenal in the Carabao Cup quarterfinal fixture could happen during Game Week 17, resulting in a blank game week. This is because the Carabao Cup quarterfinals happen during the midweek between Game Week 16-17, and Palace have their Conference League games scheduled then. So the teams blanking in 17, if that happens, are Crystal Palace, Arsenal, Leeds United and Everton. That means there's a chance that Arsenal and Everton would double in Game Week 16 as a result. Arsenal would face Wolves at home and Everton away, whilst the Toffees would face Chelsea away and Arsenal at home. Now, the last sentence, it's just worth highlighting that it's not Everton, it should be Crystal Palace. So Leeds and Crystal Palace are not expected to double in the first half of the season if they blank in 17. But there were updates, of course. So Dale Johnson from the BBC had an article and he talked about this. Crystal Palace are set to play 4 matches in 8 days because of a fixture pileup caused by reaching the quarterfinals of the Carabao Cup after the 3-0 win against Liverpool. So this was Ben Crellin's tweets here. So I'm less sure that blank Game Week 17 will happen now. Dale thinks that the most likely outcome is that Arsenal versus Palace will take place on Tuesday, the 16th of December, forcing Palace to play on Sunday, Tuesday and Thursday. This would mean no Premier League games would be rescheduled to make room for Arsenal versus Crystal Palace. And the follow-up tweet says, it's hard to say how likely this fixture clash is to cause a blank game week. Last night, I thought blank Game Week 17 was around 75% likely. Today, I think blank Game Week 17 is around 50% likely. So that's still a good chance, right? So it might be worth holding on to the free hit as a result. So that's why things can change compared to what I talked about in my chip strategy. And I'm quite open to saving the free hit for later on, just in case we do get this blank game week and also double in Game Week 16. Let me know your thoughts in the live chat. Also drop a like as well because it goes a long way to supporting the channel. I've answered hundreds of questions in this stream. Also covered different news like injury updates on Victor Gyökeres, talked about Nick Voltemada's substitution and much more. The FDR until Game Week 16, talking about chip strategies and offering solutions for your FPL teams. So let's wrap things up by answering a few more questions. And I did talk about FPL Challenge as well. I might refer to that one more time. Ratan says, is it worth considering Konate in Game Week 12, meaning he is 0.6 million cheaper than Van Dijk and he's getting DEFCON off them? I still think Van Dijk is worth the extra millions, but I understand why you asked this question. I just don't think it would have been, you know, a real debate before Game Week 10, basically, where Van Dijk got 5 points, he was booked, and Konate got 8 points overall. I still think Van Dijk is more likely to score. He'll get DEFCON more consistently. And I think in terms of bonus points, Van Dijk is also far more likely. Yeah, bonus points have been added in FPL. Thank you very much. I'll refresh the page. So you can see Erling Haaland on 26. And very soon I'll update FPL Challenge as well. Use 5 free transfers for the first time ever. It went well. Yeah, that's nicely done. I don't think I've had 5 free transfers and used them. Maybe 3 or 4. I'd have to double check though, because obviously that was a change we saw last season. On a scale of 1 to 10, how crazy do you think it is to triple captain Haaland versus Liverpool? A good question. I'd probably say 3. It's not that crazy. I don't think it's that crazy. It's not the best opportunity. I'd rather do it in Game Week 13 against Leeds at home. And someone asked about triple captaining Haaland this week against Bournemouth, and I thought, considering his record against them, probably not. I thought he would have bigger, hauls to come. But it's not too far off the Burnley return, of course, that I got in Game Week 6. So ultimately, Erling Haaland's fixture proof. I would personally save it for Game Week 13, but that's just my opinion. Dara says, Dylan, am I an idiot? I sold Haaland, Jack and Anderson to Saka, Gabriel and Voltemada. Well, the 3 players you brought in are great, but yeah, selling Haaland is the one that kicked you in the teeth. The other 2, not so much. I know Anderson got a clean sheet, so that rubbed a bit of salt in the wounds. I want to say you're an idiot. You tried something different, and if Haaland ended up blanking against Bournemouth, which he typically has done in home matches in the Premier League, then you would have been calling yourself a genius. You'd be like, Dylan, am I a genius? I sold Haaland. And I'm like, yeah, you are, Dara. Well done. So things can just change very quickly. But ultimately, when you've got a player in that form, and yes, I know he blanked against Aston Villa away recently, but Erling Haaland is just on another level right now. He's up there with Mbappe and Kane as the best goal scorers in world football. So it's difficult to sell players like that. And I'll get onto it in UCL Fantasy tomorrow. Start Burn or Richards next week? Yeah, good question. I would be tempted to start Richards, but I did say earlier I think Brighton Crystal Palace could be a high-scoring game, but I just don't think Newcastle keep a clean sheet away from home against Brentford. If it was at St James's Park, it'd be a different story. With FPL now being more engaged managers than ever before, what would you consider a good rank now? Look, 200k, 300k are still good ranks, but I'm used to finishing in the top 100k. That's where I want to finish, and whenever I don't, I feel disappointed. That's been the case, of course, in the past 2 seasons, but yeah, I think it's different now. You know, back, let's say 5-10 years ago, whilst there was still an achievement to get to top 10k and stuff like that, you could argue 50k, 100k is similar now compared to how top 10, 20k was back then. That's just my opinion. You might have a different view, and I understand that, but it is definitely more difficult now. More people are engaged. You have massive swings here, and in the last season or so, fewer doubles and blanks to maybe gain some points. But yeah, that's always a debate. I think they're all good ranks, but ultimately I'm aiming for the top 100k, and my kind of aim always is to get my best ever rank. So getting to the top 10k is what I'm looking for in FPL. I've done that consistently in UCL Fantasy, but FPL is a different story. Knee-jack free moves, Guiu, Saka, Mukiele out, Joao Pedro, Rice, Chalobah in. For the next 2-3 weeks, I like the Chelsea players, but not long-term. I think Declan Rice is a long-term hold. That's a great transfer. As for the players you sold, I think the only one that could bite you is Saka out. Guiu out is absolutely fine. That's a good decision. And Joao Pedro is a massive upgrade. Mukiele is still worth having in some cases as a 5th defender, but I think the Black Cats will keep fewer clean sheets over the next couple of weeks. They've got some very tough fixtures on the horizon. I have a feeling Anderson scores against Everton. I believe he's done that in the past, so I wouldn't be completely against that, to be fair. The United Strand guy is never getting a haircut. To be fair, though, 5 wins in a row isn't easy. Like, only Arsenal have done that recently. Liverpool did it at the beginning of the season. Have Man City done that? They got 3-4 wins in a row, but I think they drew a game in between, probably against Arsenal. So I don't actually... It is a difficult one, but obviously it's a bit of a meme. With Man United, they were struggling to get 2 wins in a row in the Premier League, let alone 5. So, yeah. I thought they'd do it when they went 1-0 up against Forest, but it was still early on in the game. How should I get in the midfield for 7.8 million? I'm guessing who? I already have Semenyo, Sarr, Saka, and Boomer. Well, fair enough. You don't want Enzo after Game Week 12, but Chelsea are still top of the FDR until Game Week 16, so I think he's a good purchase. There is Minter, who I've talked about before. You could also consider... Declan Rice, Caicedo. I think one of those two would be pretty decent. Joao Pedro captain shout next game, it could pay off. Wolves are woeful. That is true, but we don't know what's going to happen now with whoever's going to be the new manager. Probably Gary O'Neill, but there are other candidates. Will Still, Michael Carrick. There's also another name that's escaping me. I think Edwards, who was at Luton Town before, and he's now at Middlesbrough. So, yeah, there's a lot of different options there, and that could also influence how things go. But Chelsea can be unreliable at times. We saw that against Sunderland very recently. Hola Dylan, tengo a Endai, Semenyo, Stack, Saka y Azar. ¿Crees que vale la pena vender a Saka y meter a Bruno, Enzo Fernández? Quiero sacar a Stack también para Bench Boost la otra semana junto a Bowen y a Diouf. Creo que sí, me gusta Saka y para mí es un jugador muy importante y en los partidos claves puede anotar un gol o una asistencia, pero si puedes comprar a Bruno Fernández, Enzo Fernández o Mbumo, que también me gusta, y con eso puedes hacer otras transferencias y mejorar tu equipo y de esa forma puedes también usar el bench boost, creo que vale la pena. Así que yo diría que sí. Para mí, Jared Bowen es mejor mantenerlo contra Burnley y después venderlo en la jornada 12. Y sí, para Diouf, sí, para mí es alguien para vender. Cuesta 4.4 millones, creo, 4.3, pero igual Diouf es alguien para vender. UCL, we only need 11 this week, all games on one day. Yeah, there is a bit of an imbalance in terms of the coverage we've got, in terms of the Tuesday and the Wednesday, but I don't try to like focus too much on it. Always have Tuesday players in your starting 11, Wednesday players on your bench. That's, obviously the most important thing. But when it comes to 7-8, 8-7, 9-6, ultimately 8-7 is the ideal structure. Having more Tuesday players, 9-6 is also fine, but it's not the end of the world if you got 10-5 either way. Ideally, though, you would have more Tuesday players, but it's not the end of the world. Is there any reason for us to keep ignoring Rice? He's rarely going to haul, but clearly that's not been a problem so far. Well, he's got a few double-digit hauls under his belt against West Ham, I believe, and Burnley. Even when he doesn't, he can get DEFCON against Liverpool. He can give you 6-7 points. He's also a magnet for bonus. So I do like Declan Rice. He's on the thumbnail. He's the most transferred in player at the moment. Yeah, I think Declan Rice is a superb addition to your FPL team. And that's why I said this before. The triple up in Arsenal's defence is going to be the kind of flavour of the month. Obviously, going an entire month without conceding a goal is incredible, but that will change. Even if they still concede only 1 goal in 5 matches or 1 goal in 3, I still expect a bit of a downturn in defensive output. So, yeah, I think Declan Rice, Saka, Gyökeres are still worth including to cover the attack as well. And Declan Rice offers the best value. There's no denying that. Which team surprised you the most this game with their performance, good and bad? That's a great question. I think the most surprising one is probably from the West Ham-Newcastle game. West Ham played very well, and after Newcastle took the lead, I thought West Ham's heads would drop, which they might have done momentarily, but yeah, I think West Ham really impressed me. And at the same time, Newcastle really, really disappointed me. I think Spurs were terrible. I really think that... I thought they'd offer more in terms of creativity, but Chelsea just dominated the game. I think 1-0 flat at Tottenham. It should have been 3 or 4. There were so many big chances there. So, yeah, I think that would be it. I think it's probably going to be one of Tottenham or Newcastle's most disappointing. And I think the most impressive for me is West Ham. Yeah. Their first home win since February in the Premier League. So very, very surprising. Do you think a triple up with Gabriel, Timber and Calafiori is better than Gabriel, Timber and Raya? No, and I covered this earlier, mate. For me, you've got 5 defender spots. If 3 of them are occupied by the same team, I think that's an imbalance. It's still similar to having Raya, right? But I'd rather have the goalkeeper in David Raya, who's also going to start every single game. There's no risk of rotation here. And the chance of injury is also less. Hopefully I haven't jinxed it. Touch wood, whatever you want to say. But yeah, also Calafiori is more injury prone. I like Calafiori as a player. He's arguably been Arsenal's best player this season. He's right up there at the moment. But yeah, Raya, Gabriel, Timber, that is the way to go. And I've offered my rankings before with Arsenal defenders. Gabriel is first, Raya is second to cover the defence, and Timber is third. Who's the best replacement for Kudus at that price point? Sarr, Enzo Fernandez would be my 2 top recommendations still. Keeping Botta for the United game, then selling, no clue who to get. So Gabriel, Lacroix, Anderson, Reinildo in your team. Yeah, difficult because if you've got Raya in goal, you don't have to go for Timber and stuff like that. Arsenal also have a few tough fixtures coming up. But I'd say Timber stands out, Munoz, but you've also got Lacroix there. There aren't many standouts apart from Arsenal defenders and Munoz, in my opinion. So those are the ones I'd recommend. Who are the best enablers in the game right now? Yeah, good question as well. I think Mukiele is still a good option. Any Sunderland 4 to 4.1 million defender will do the trick. I think Rodon. I also would say in the midfield, Xhaka. Yeah, Xhaka. Up front, there might be more options if you consider Thiago, Welbeck, and maybe Isidore as enablers. But some of these players like Mukiele and Isidore, I wouldn't be buying in. If you got them, I think you can hold on to them in certain situations, as long as you don't start them week in, week out with the upcoming fixtures. The best defender other than Gabriel? Probably Timber. Sorry to say that. Enjoying your show from Zambia. Thank you very much. But since you've got Raya and Rice, which is very good, by the way, I'd say Munoz. Go for Munoz if you're looking to cover a different defence, have a bit of excitement with that position. I know Gay was the standout Palace defender with 10 points. Lacroix got 8. But Munoz has the highest ceiling, and he's shown that recently. So, yeah, apart from Timber, the best defender you can buy is Daniel Munoz. Will Still is the manager to use Football Manager to do tactical options, and he doesn't have a UEFA licensed coach. Yeah, he was talked about a lot when he was in Ligue 1, but things haven't gone well, of course, at Southampton. and he got sacked today. Is Anderson to Munoz a good transfer? Yes, I think so. 500k rank, climbing the ladder slow and steady. Nicely done. I think that's a good rank to be at this stage of the season. Yeah, Cherky got 2 assists today. He has decent goals and assist potential compared to the minutes played. He scored against Swansea in the last minutes. Against Wolves back in Gameweek 1, he came on as a substitute and scored. I'll be honest, I'd rather have Cherky than Reinders, and of course it was Cherky who started today, much to my dismay. Nice little rhyme there. Yeah, I think Cherky is not someone I'd be buying in FPL, but if you want to go for something a bit different, I think Cherky, as long as you're kind of tempering your expectations and you realize that he could be benched, I think he's a very good option at that price point. Something a little bit different anyway. Maybe not a very good option. And remember, you've also got Declan Rice, Sarr, Enzo. I'd pick all 3 of them over Cherky all day long. And with City, I think Haaland's the only one worth keeping long term. But if you're looking for a differential, Cherky's your man. With Kai Havertz in merge to return soon, could Gyökeres minutes be around 70 minutes or less? Yeah, that's a possibility. But I think Gyökeres has done an underrated job at Arsenal. There have been some poor performances, you know, but I think the Burnley game, that was the best 45 minutes he's shown in an Arsenal shirt. He also scored 2 goals against Atletico Madrid very recently, so he can score against big teams as well. And ultimately, Gyökeres is first choice. Havertz is still going to build up his fitness. It's going to take him some time to get back. And I would expect Gyökeres to be first choice at number 9. Isak and Ekatike are official starting together while Salah's at AFCON. Yes, and there's also the possibility for Frimpong to play as the right winger. Enzo or Sarr and Bruno or Mbeumo. It will be Sarr and Mbeumo for me. I still like Enzo and Bruno though. And this could obviously change on a weekly basis. So, for example, against Wolves at home, while Sarr's facing Brighton, Enzo looks better on paper. The same goes for Burnley away. But yeah, that'll be my answer. Sarr and Mbeumo. I still like the other 2 though. I showed you my chip strategy earlier, Easy. Or at least I showed you the recommendations for every single chip. So my current plan now is to save the free hit for later in the season, just in case I get a lot of injuries or suspensions, or if blank Gameweek 17 happens. The same goes for double Gameweek 16. I've only got the wildcard remaining as well. And as mentioned multiple times in recent videos, including today, Gameweek 12 or 13 is the most likely. Yeah, I think the chips will be completely different. You know, I wouldn't have used the bench boost. I never would have used it in the first half of the season if we didn't have double chips this season. With triple captain, I did use it early last season on Haaland against Ipswich Town, where he scored a hat-trick in Gameweek 2. The same goes for Gameweek 6 this season on Haaland against Burnley. But I probably would have saved it for the second half of the season. But bench boost, I can guarantee you I would not have used it this week. Is Anderson to Munoz a good transfer? Yes. Covered this as well, Easy. My rank target always is to get the best rank I've ever done. So to get into the top 10k is what I'm looking to do. But yeah, honestly, an improvement from last season and the year before is the kind of bare minimum. That's kind of the target I set. And then my lofty target is to get my best ever rank. And yeah, finishing top 1k, top 10k is the grand aspiration. Dylan should do that challenge with his beard and 5 games Arsenal wins before the shave. Yeah, but I mean, that's a bit too late for that now. It's 9 wins in a row. It could be 10 on Tuesday, hopefully. And yeah, unbeaten in 11 or 12. But yeah, I think it's different with Arsenal and their situation compared to United. Of course, we've talked about that before. Will Alderete start tomorrow? Well, I did show you my predicted lineups. I was quite conflicted about this. On Friday, when I posted the video, I had Gertruda starting instead of Alderete. So I'm quite conflicted about it. But if Alderete is fit enough, I believe he will start. Even if Sunderland play a back 5 or just a back 4, I think Alderete would still be first choice. But it all depends on his fitness if he has cleared the concussion protocols. Please, just one good week, please. Want to go into an international break with something. I've consistently done well, but too many risks and knee-jerks this season. Yeah, it can be frustrating. And going into an international break with a green arrow, which I did last time out, is always very encouraging. It gives you confidence, peace of mind as well, maybe. And after that, I was able to build some momentum, and I went from like 3-4 million to 800,000, which isn't anything spectacular. I'm not like telling my life story and I'm going to tell my grandchildren or something, but yeah, it's something obviously very positive, and you can build upon that. So hopefully you can get that green arrow next week, and if you've got any players tomorrow, I wish you the best of luck there, Twisted Parky. Arsenal will only have a dip in defensive output if I buy free. Pedro should have had a hat-trick. The one he scored, all of us in the stream would probably have bagged that. Yeah, Joao Pedro's a good player, but very inconsistent. And last season, as good as he was for Brighton, I always said he relied a lot on penalties for his output. But when he does score, he has a great chance of getting bonus points, and we saw what he did in the Club World Cup, but that's just a small sample size, and he has yet to show that consistency in the Premier League. Yeah, top 3 teams to get relegated. I've said Wolves for quite a while now, and I'm going to stick with that for the time being. I still think one of Burnley or Leeds, possibly both, will go down. So if I had to say, yeah, Wolves, Burnley, and yeah, I mean, Forest are down there. Brentford are a little bit better now, I think, but they were one of my kind of top 5, 6 considerations to go down at the beginning of the season. I think Everton will be fine. West Ham, I mean, before today, they were in big, big trouble, but I think they've got a good manager. They've got some quality players like Paqueta and Bowen who can bail them out. So, yeah, it's going to be Wolves, Burnley, and Leeds, in my opinion, but not a guarantee. I think the relegation battle might be the most exciting part of this season, actually. I don't think Haaland's single-handedly saving FPL teams because his effective ownership is so high, so I don't really see it that way. Would you go Timber to... Is that Gabriel? I think he's worth the upgrade, and by the way, Gabriel could rise in price tonight, which I covered earlier, but I would only do that if it's a free transfer and if you don't have any other fires to put out or, you know, kind of priority transfers. So that's only for people who are kind of settled and they're like, oh, what do I do with my free transfers? Like, I could make this upgrade. In that situation, I would do it, but it's not a complete priority. For me, it's Wolves, Burnley, and one of West Ham, Leeds, Nottingham. Yeah, I agree. I would probably say Leeds, but that could obviously change. A few weeks ago, I was thinking Forest and West Ham were in big, big trouble. Captain Gabriel next week? Not against Sunderland, no. I think Arsenal could concede at the Stadium of Light. Now, the Gunners have a brilliant record in that stadium, but yeah, I think Sunderland are very competitive this season. It will be quite a low-scoring game. In that scenario, if Arsenal keep a clean sheet, then Gabriel could get 9, 12 points again, but I don't think I'd captain Gabriel over Haaland or even Joao Pedro or a Chelsea attacker, arguably, but you'll see my top 10 captaincy list in a couple of days' time. I have Dubravka, Esteve, Van der Ven, and Josh King on the bench. Do you think it's worth a bench boost in 11? I'm not so sure. Probably not. I don't think Spurs keep a clean sheet against United. Dubravka and Esteve away to West Ham. No. If it was at home, maybe. But I don't think they'll return. And Josh King has been very frustrating. Now, he's a quality player for his age. He's got potential. He could obviously score his first Premier League goal at some stage, but I don't think I'd bench boost that. Haaland says after post-match interview, he tried to help FPL managers and he knows that FPL managers are mad because Pep subbed them off. Well, a lot of players do play FPL. I mean, look at Salah over the years as well. And FPL is becoming a big thing even in the media. You know, high-profile players or former players, yeah, maybe not managers, but players and pundits are playing the game. My second/dad team without Haaland is nearly on 100, so it is possible. Once ever, 1,000 games at the Mo. Yeah, it's possible to have a good week even without these kind of template picks, and it's quite exciting, right? And rewarding when you go against the template and you're rewarded, but that's not always the case. And I've had many occasions over the last couple of years where I do something a bit different, whether it's the captaincy, a transfer, or my team selection and my benching sort of dilemmas, and it goes horribly wrong. But conversely, there are times where it goes right, and people say it balances out. Not necessarily. You need an element of luck when it comes to these things, and I think ultimately with good decision making, you increase your chances of getting lucky, but it's not always the case. Saka to Mbumo and Rangers to Rice Sarr, or should I do Saka to Mbumo and Mings to Timber for triple Arsenal defence? I think Rangers to Rice or Sarr is the best thing you can do, mate. I think that's the biggest upgrade, and Saka will still get plenty of goal contributions this season. Okay, so just bear in mind, if you haven't put a question in now, I think it's probably best to save it for the comment section or for Discord, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky. I will be wrapping up now and giving myself a bit of a break for tomorrow, with UCL Fantasy being the priority, and I'll also be working on FPL content throughout the week. I wonder which defender will get double-digit returns next week. I mean, Gabriel could still do it, but I wouldn't bank on it against Sunderland away. But I put his name in the hat. Maybe James or Cucurella. I mean, Chalobah's not too far off that as well. Possibly, I'd say maybe Munoz, but I'd expect Brighton to score. I had a terrible week, but we move. It happens, right? Game week 9 was quite poor for a lot of us, or quite disappointing, underwhelming. But when it's a high-scoring week and you feel like you're kind of way off it, it can be frustrating. Top 10 differentials till Game week 16 plus. Well, some players like Saar and Rice aren't differentials, but they will give you massive rank rises because of their effective ownership. So I think those two are worth considering. I'd also say Danny Welbeck or Igor Thiago as budget forwards would also be, in fact, more applicable with their lower ownership. So Igor Thiago has less than 8%, and I think Welbeck has, what, 8? No, he's got 7.2. So yeah, I think those two up front would stand out. In the midfield, Rice, Saar. Yeah, I mean, you said top 10 differentials. I'm going to struggle to get to 10, but I'll try my best. So let me just go to the FPL website, remind myself of some of the ownership figures, and see what we can do here. So goalkeepers, I'm not really going to say. I think Rye's the best one by some distance. In the defensive line, if I could pick out one differential, I'd say Reece James until Game week 13 wildcard, and even until what you say, Game week 16, 17, Chelsea are near the top of the FDR. So yeah, he does fit the bill. Reece James. I think that's probably it for defenders, though. I'm not going to force a low-owned pick just for the sake of it. So in the midfield, I mentioned two players, Rice and Saar. If you don't class them as differentials, I understand, but I still think they'll give you significant rank rises. Maybe Cherky, but just bear in mind with any City player, bar Haaland, you're going to get rotation. So if you can stomach that, maybe Cherky could be a decent choice. Up front, I mentioned Thiago and Welbeck. So I think that's a good list for you. And it's quite difficult to find consistent, reliable differentials at the moment. I guess if I'm going to want Timber as well as Gabriel, maybe not worth swapping, I mean. Yeah, that's fair enough. Captain on Joao Pedro. Well, after he finally returned against Tottenham and the chances he had, you see how the pendulum swings, and that's why I told people to hold on to him if necessary, not take a -4 hit to sell him to to Mateta or Voltemada. But yeah, he's going to be up there in my top 10 list. How high he's going to be, you just got to wait a few more days for that. But Haaland is still the man to beat, unfortunately. FPL players cannot be mad. Even if Haaland goes off early, he already smashed it. And if everyone has him, it does not matter if he plays 5 minutes or 60. I agree. Obviously, Haaland won't really think about effective ownership and stuff like that. I'm probably sure he's happy that so many people have him in FPL, or you know, he would expect that. But yeah, it's exactly that. I don't really see Erling Haaland returning, with the exception for Game week 6 because I triple captained him. That's the only time where I benefited from Haaland doing well. Apart from that, he's actually cost me in many weeks this season when I didn't have him. Any updates on double possible blanks? I covered this earlier. I don't want to retrace things I just covered. Hopefully you understand that. But after the stream is done, feel free to rewind. It's also covered at the beginning of my Predicted Lineups podcast. So that's going to be even easier for you to follow. Arthurpus' squad, 1 free transfer wildcard left. Should I roll? Defensive line is fine, even though Senesi against Villa away isn't great. I think you put your team earlier, unless I'm mistaken, but yeah, it's looking solid. I like your setup. The forward line doesn't need to be touched for now. With the midfield, I like it, but there are other midfielders to consider, like Declan Rice, Mbeumo, Bruno Fernandes, and also Enzo Fernandez. But yeah, if you had to make one transfer, maybe sell one of your other defenders, and then you can bench Senesi. But I don't know how much money you've got in the bank, who's on your bench, but that's just a way of improving your team on paper. As I mentioned before, Game week 11 was a possibility for me for the free hit, and I'll delve into this in my team selection, but because Game week 17 being a blank and then a double in 16, you know, that's still a possibility. I am looking to maybe save the free hit for later on in the first half of the season. Just ensure you use all your chips before Game week 20. I have the Bournemouth goalkeeper and Newcastle goalkeeper. Who would you choose for Game week 11? Probably Pope still, but I don't think either will keep a clean sheet. Oh yeah, James was thinking about him. I think it makes a lot of sense for Game week 12, 13 wildcarders, and even until 16, which you asked about, he also ticks the box, I'd say. Maybe I get James rather than Munoz this week. After a few weeks backing against Haaland, I am now 100 behind number 1 in my league. Look, 100 points is a lot, but it's November. I've overturned 100 points by December, by January, actually. It's possible to overturn it. Obviously, with fewer doubles and blanks, you could say that it's more difficult, but yeah, it's definitely not insurmountable. That could swing the other way. Voltemada won't be subbed off halftime too many times, again, unless Hal wants to create a rift. I think he's a good one to keep. I agree. Voltemada is a hold. I don't think he's a sell. What week should I triple captain Haaland? Gameweek 13. Once again, if you rewind the stream or go to my chip strategy, and even in my recent videos, I talk about alternative weeks to use every single booster. Gameweek 13 for me is the next best opportunity to triple captain Erling Haaland. Look, free hit in Gameweek 11 is very circumstantial and team dependent. For some people, you might have a lot of Palace and Brighton players facing each other. So by free hitting in such a week, you can diversify your team, triple up on Chelsea against Wolves and do things like this. But that was just a plan I had after using websites like FPL.team, looking at the fixtures and seeing an opportunity. But at the moment, it's more likely I'll save it for later on, just in case we have a blank in 17 and a double in 16. But as covered earlier, the chances are less likely. And I think the most probable situation is that Palace will play 4 games in 8 days. No rescheduled fixture there for Arsenal, Crystal Palace in the Carabao Cup. So therefore, Crystal Palace will still feature in Gameweek 17. No blanks there for them, Leeds United, Everton or Arsenal. But I'm still keeping my options open. I have 0.3 in the bank and Van de Ven on the bench. Yeah, I think he's the one to sell. Yeah. Thanks for the advice and cheers for the stream. So it's kind of difficult to say, like, who do you sell Van de Ven to? Since you've got Gabriel, you've got Senesi and, yeah, Munoz. I think that's pretty good. But you've got Raya Gabriel. You don't need a triple Arsenal defense, even though that looks great. And, of course, you've got Saka anyway. Yeah, I just think Van de Ven's the one to sell, basically. And you could even downgrade him to a cheap defender and just have them, you know, always third on your bench. So that could be Mukiele, Rodon, etc. And that gives you more money to spend elsewhere for other upgrades. Coco077 says, Gyökeres and Ekdal to Thiago and Timber for a -4 hit. As a duo, I think you are improving. So Thiago Timber looks really solid. I can't help but think if Gyökeres is fit, I don't mind keeping him for the next couple. And I said that before Burnley as well. We saw him score a brace in the Champions League against Atletico Madrid. He is a pure goal scorer. And once the confidence and adaptation comes about, he's going to score even more. He's got 6 already in all competitions. Not great, but there is something to build from. Ultimately, if I'm looking long-term, bigger picture, I think Thiago and Timber will pay off the -4 hit. But I also think Gyökeres can actually kind of bite you by selling him against Sunderland. He's also got Tottenham and Chelsea. I could see him scoring in those games potentially, particularly against Tottenham Hotspur. But yeah, I'd say it's worth it just because Thiago and Timber is a good duo. Rank Thiago, Mateta, Welbeck. Mateta first, Thiago second, Welbeck third. There's not much in it, you could argue, but Mateta's still the best one. Would you go about Haaland on free hit next game week? I still think he'll score against Liverpool. Despite the clean sheet yesterday, I think Aston Villa had openings and opportunities which they didn't capitalise on, and Man City rely a lot on Haaland, but I think it'll be quite an open game and Haaland will score. So I'd still include him on the free hit personally. At the moment, any weeks you would target against Haaland? Is this for triple captaincy? Or in terms of just captaincy in general? I mean, you can go against him for the captaincy, you know, when he's facing Liverpool. I'm not saying he's definitely going to score or that he's got the highest ceiling, but I just think stylistically, profile-wise, you look at his form, I still think he's going to return. And I don't have that same confidence in Saka, in Bruno Fernandes, in all these premium options, even Mohamed Salah in the same fixture facing Man City. But yeah, there are opportunities. I thought Bournemouth was one of them. Obviously, we saw how he did in the end. He was the best captain again, for the most part, of course, unless you went massively differential and went for Rice or something a bit left field, maybe Sessegnon or Gomez. No one's going to do that, right? But yeah, I think there are opportunities, but until I see a downturn in his form or Man City struggling to create, which is very rare, I'm sorry to say this, but I think he's the go-to captain. Yeah, just captaincy, fair enough. I'd say Gameweek 11 is a possibility, but at the moment it's still very likely I'll do it. Everyone going Saka, I might pivot and go Rice. Yeah, that's understandable. I think Rice offers better value, but just like Bruno and Mbumo from the last couple of weeks, people will say, oh, should I sell Bruno to Mbumo? And then look who gets the return this week. Not a massive swing, but still, that can happen. I still like Saka for the next three, but I understand why you're looking to sell. How beneficial do you think it is to chase team value early in the season by doing early transfers more often than not? As I always say, I prefer information. We've got Champions League games in midweek and other competitions, Europa Conference League and Europa League. So ultimately, if you can, I'd recommend waiting because you can get other injuries happen and you've got other fires to put out and you've already made transfers and then you have to take hits or be forced to wildcard or free hit when you maybe didn't want to. But I've done it a few times this season, I will admit, where I know what transfer I want to make. I've got decent squad depth. So I just think, you know what, I'll pull the trigger now. And it also prevents me overthinking in the next deadline stream. So I'm not going to be or act like a saint and say, yeah, always prioritize information. But I just think if you can do it, that is more important than team value. How important is it? I think it's a little bit important still because it allows you, particularly in the second half of the season, to build an even stronger squad. But there's also an element of needing these players to go up in price by 0.2 million whilst they're in your squad to gain selling value. So it's not always actually going to result in you benefiting from going early, if you catch my drift. Midfield options are not scoring at the moment. Salah, Haaland draft will be what people want from week 12. Yeah, but Salah is still not worth the money yet. And ultimately, he scored against Villa. And yes, it's a goal. I'm not saying it doesn't count. But he literally got gifted that goal on a plate by Emi Martinez. That's not always going to happen. Yeah, there is a case to go for Salah, Haaland on the wild card. Goes for something a little bit different. And then go for cheap midfielders like Ndai, Sarr, Rice, Caicedo, etc. But there is no clear strategy or winning formula in FPL this season, which is both good, but also it makes it very challenging in terms of finding consistent performers you can rely upon week in, week out, particularly for the captaincy. Danish says, my current team, do you suggest any changes for the coming 1 to 2 weeks? So is that a wildcard in 13? That could also influence my suggestions, just saying. But yeah, I like the squad overall, even though Pope has been quite poor. I still think Newcastle have one of the best defences in the Premier League. I would start Chalobah against Wolves, even though I highlighted earlier that, you know, they don't have a great record against Wolves at home in terms of clean sheets. But I'd certainly start Chalobah over Mukiele, that's for sure. I would also, yeah, I think starting Gay is just about fine considering your other options. I think with the rest, I'd keep things as they are. There is a case to start Caicedo, and that's the problem with him. Because of his price tag and he's not a consistent goal scorer or assister, you could be tempted to bench him sometimes, and then he gets a 10-pointer against Tottenham, as we just saw. So Caicedo's my only concern about benching, but with your defensive line, I would start Chalobah over Mukiele, and you don't need to make any transfers at the moment, in my opinion, even though Voltemada was disappointing. So I'm only answering a few more, like I said. More messages are still coming in, but it is what it is. I'm just going to cut off. I'm just saying it now, so don't complain. Arthur, maybe the message after is the last message I'm covering. So otherwise, if you want something answered, there is the deadline stream in a couple of days' time. Of course, I'm doing one for UCL Fantasy on Tuesday as well, but that will be focused, of course, on the Champions League. And there is the comment section. There are my social media platforms. Like this stream. Let's get it over to 150 likes by the end. Subscribe. Let's close in on 37k on YouTube. Hit the notification bell for updates on my videos for UCL Fantasy and FPL, which I'll cover for the rest of the season. And also become a patron or channel member for many, many perks like early access to my videos. Also, you'll get prior to player comments, which is very useful in a stream like this. It ensures that you will be answered no matter what. Enzo and Van Dijk or Gakpo and Konate? Enzo and Van Dijk. Yeah, probably Haaland captain next week, but it will be talked about in my team selection. Pedro says considering Rice and Saka out, given DEFCON now exists and Rice assists, can't see Saka getting much more points over the season. That's how it seems now, and I get it. Rice offers better value. I'm not denying that, but it would not surprise me to see Saka return in 2 or 3 of the next 3 matches, and Rice is just getting DEFCON or just, let's say, fewer points in every single one of those matches. It can turn the other way very quickly, and Saka is still, generally speaking, one of the more consistent performers and premiums, but that hasn't been the case this season. Bournemouth could have been an opportunity, but not the high line they played. I agree. I would say Haaland being the main man by a distance. Team value does not matter that much especially with cheap def-content players. Yeah, maybe this season value is actually less important because we've got so many cheaper options. That is true. Something I didn't talk about or consider. I always prioritize information anyway. Still waiting on a Lacroix goal. He always underperforms. Against West Ham, he hit the post, I think, and blanked in that game. But at least he gets DEFCON sometimes. He has been a poor signing for me in general. Only 2 returns for me since Game Week 4, but it is what it is. Yeah, I agree. Haaland can score any given week against anyone. I think it's more of just seeking to do something different for 1 week after weeks of Haaland captain. I'm not against that, mate. I'm just saying, you know, even against Bournemouth, for example, I see how they defend against Palace, and I'm like, why would I not captain Haaland if they are happy to play such a high line against a decent Palace side? I didn't expect them to do that against Man City today to that level, but yeah, Haaland could have got a hat-trick. I think a brace is probably fair in the end, but Bournemouth weren't good defensively. So I'm not against people going different. I like it when people have these different ideas. Joao Pedro could outscore Haaland, but before the Tottenham game, how many games did Joao Pedro go without even shooting, let alone scoring a goal? And he missed some big opportunities against Tottenham yesterday. He should have scored 2 or 3 goals. Yeah, Cherki, obviously fair play for bringing him in. Massive differential, but just bear in mind the minutes will be a concern. He's not going to start every single game. If you can stomach that, then enjoy the points when they come. How does being an FPL content creator affect your strategy? I try not to let it affect me. I feel like I actually perform better when I didn't make content consistently. Maybe that's a bit unfair, to be fair, because I think some of my best seasons were in my first or second year of making content. I try not to let it affect me. Is it possible that subconsciously it has an impact? It's definitely a consideration. It's something I've also considered over the last couple of weeks, or maybe not so weeks, but I have considered it before. I would say no, it doesn't really affect me, but yeah, it's definitely something worth maybe thinking about in more detail. Vicario, Timber, Saliba, Van der Ven, Saka, Mbumo, Sarr, Xhaka, Welbeck, Mateta, Haaland. What do I do? It's a good squad, but I think Vicario could be upgraded to Raya. The problem is you've got 3 Arsenal players already. I know Saliba is back. He's not like a priority sell, but I would do something like Vicario to Raya and then Saliba to Munoz, for example. And I think other players to maybe consider selling is Van der Ven. You've got a double up in Spurs defence. That is your biggest concern. I would probably get rid of both of them, actually. And I don't know what money you've got in the bank, how many free transfers. Are you going to wildcard in 13? What's your chip strategy? All of this would be very helpful to give you a definitive answer. But in terms of your worst picks, Van der Ven and Vicario, that's for sure. And to cover Arsenal defensively, you're missing the very best in Gabriel. And I think Raya in goal is a great long-term solution for your goalkeeping problems. Thank you, Danish. I appreciate that. I'll try to go through your team as well very quickly. I think I might have done so anyway. I did, actually. I did go through your team earlier. Start Chalobah, as I mentioned before. And yeah, it's all said a few minutes ago. Who do I sell Saka for? I think Saka's worth holding on to, mate. But I've mentioned midfielders in my wildcard videos and today multiple times. Declan Rice, Ismaila Sarr, Enzo Fernandez, Caicedo. They're all worth considering. Mbumo, Bruno Fernandes. But I don't know if you've got some of these players already, how much money you've got in the bank. All of this is very relevant. Yeah, it's just the fact that Arsenal seem to score off corner set pieces almost every game, and Rice takes those. That will also dry up a little bit, and Arsenal will need to create more from open play, or just score more from open play to win the matches. Yeah, you warned us in the deadline. I just risked it for Saka. No, that's fair enough, but I like Saka. I did mention him as one of my favourite differential captains. It didn't work out. I don't think it's a bad decision, though. But yes, completely get what you're saying. Saka does have more big haul potential. I also think he's a big game player, and facing Chelsea and Tottenham in the next 3, I'd be surprised if he blanked in all 3 of those matches. The way I see it, this is my prediction right now, it could age horribly. I think he'll return against Sunderland and Tottenham and blank against Chelsea. We'll see how that ages. Yeah, Joao Pedro captain is tempting but risky with Haaland doing Haaland things. It's also the fact that Joao Pedro isn't consistent enough. He started well, only blanked against Palace in Game Week 1, was getting returns until Game Week 4, had the Club World Cup where he was brilliant. So by that stage, you could think, I can rely on Joao Pedro for the captaincy, but then you see the next 5 games, and we just lose that confidence and trust. No one could have missed that Joao Pedro chance. Which one, mate? I mean, there are a few, but yeah, there was one in particular that was even worse. Some poor finishing, good saves by Vicario, but ultimately Chelsea should have won by more. Should I get Sarr, Mint or Rice? Yeah, Mint is another one. I like him, but I still think Sarr for me. I do like Declan Rice, of course, so he's been talked about a lot in this video. and I'm not against going for him, but Ismail Assar for me. Thank you, Anderil. I'll see you on Tuesday for the UCL Fantasy Deadline stream. Haaland versus Bournemouth High Line. Yeah, it is what it is though, right? I thought Haaland would score 1 or 2 goals, and my prediction was Man City 2-1. So not too far off in the end with my prediction, but sometimes I'll get it wrong. It is what it is. Thank you, Harrison. I've got 2 free transfers. I still think Saka's worth holding on to, but I get why you want to sell. He's just not offering enough value. Is Petrovic the best goalkeeper for the run-in? I don't think so. I mean, Rufus has been the best so far this season in terms of value, but I wouldn't go for him now. I just think Raya and then Gabriel is the best way of covering Arsenal defensively, and then you've got space for one of Rice, Saka or Gyökeres in the attack. I don't mind a triple up in Arsenal defensively, so you can go for Timber, Gabriel and Raya, but I just rather have a set and forget goalkeeper for the rest of the season and avoid transfers there, and you don't need to sell Raya at any point. Yeah, that's true. I get that. I mean, at least he scored it. Let's look at the positives, but it should have been more. Should I play Bowen? Yes. I mean, you got the Bravk on the bench boost. Well, if you got Bowen, I don't understand the question, sorry, because if you're bench boosting, I mean, what are you saying? Are you going to sell Bowen? Like, what's the context? But yeah, Bowen against Burnley, I wouldn't be selling. Should I sell Pedro Porro? Yes. Gay is fine, but you've also got Munoz. He's my favourite Palace defender. More exciting to own. There are other players to consider as well, mainly Gabriel, Timber. I wouldn't say there are many standout defenders, but maybe Reece James as a differential if you want someone more exciting and low-owned. This is an Arsenal shirt, I think, from 1994-95. I'll double-check that for you. Maybe even now, quickly. But like I said, try not to put more questions in now because I have gone on for a while. And yeah, I said I'd finish a while ago and I'm still here because I'm enjoying it. But I need to save myself for the Champions League content tomorrow. There is a lot more to look forward to. This might be actually even earlier, but I did get this from the Arsenal store, and for a good price, actually, oddly enough. I think this is 1992-93. No, maybe not. I think the sleeves is different, so it might be 1991. Oh my god, when am I going to get this right? Where is it? Bloody hell. I'll double check this for you, mate, but it's definitely from the 90s. I think it's around 1994, but I'm not having a great time at this. Let me just put it that way. Yeah, I think it's around that time. Oh, is it this? Yeah, I think 1990, 1991, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's the... Yeah, it's one of those years, but yeah, you're making me look like a fool, to be fair. Not intentionally, that's my fault, but yeah, a good question. I didn't really think about it. It's from the 90s. Ian Wright, the Brighton reject on the back. Joking, I love Righty. Yeah, I mean, that's surprising because you are a Brighton fan. Roberto and Rudy says, Mbumo, Enzo, Caicedo, Semenyo. Who would you take out, add into this midfield? I don't think you need to sell any of them, to be honest. Semenyo has good fixtures after Villa away. Enzo and Caicedo have got Wolves at home and Burnley away, and I think both of them are arguably long-term holds. I don't like having 2 Chelsea midfielders out of 5 spots personally, but they are good options in isolation. And Mbumo has been in great form before the Forest game. He's on set pieces like corners, so you don't need to sell them, is basically the answer. As an Arsenal fan, do you ever watch AFTV or DR Sports? I have watched those channels in the past, particularly AFTV, when it first, started gaining traction, even before that, actually, when it first was founded. But yeah, less so now, I'd say. One last comment, your stream has cheered me up after shit week. Well, I'm glad that you found some value in it, not just in terms of FPL insight, but also it cheered you up in some way. I appreciate that. And yeah, hopefully next week is much better. Yeah, I think it's 1991-92. I think so as well. Hi, Dylan, best Chelsea defender. As I just covered, Reece James for me. I like Cucurella and Chalobah. I think they're decent options for the next 2, but look, if I'm looking long-term, big picture, I think Cucurella's the best, but up until Game Week 13 to 16, Reece James is the one. Thank you as well, Adam Fine, and thank you, Rat. I am going to, wrap things up. Some of these questions I've answered, and ultimately, like I said, I need to, give myself a little break, have dinner, and recharge the batteries for tomorrow, a double upload for UCL Fantasy. If you haven't already, like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also hit that notification bell so you're always up to date on my content, not just for FPL, but also UCL Fantasy. I uploaded a limitless video earlier today, and for channel members and patrons, I did upload that on Friday night. So you got 2 days early access. Go to patreon.com/FPLDylan for priority reply to comments, early access to my videos, and many other perks. There is also my Discord server, the FPL League, Spotify, and all these different social media platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky. Just type in FPL Dylan or Dylan RCM and you'll find me very easily. Leaving a 5-star review on Spotify also helps me out a lot. I appreciate all your support. We will close in on 37,000 subscribers. The target is to reach that goal by the Tuesday deadline stream for UCL Fantasy. That's when I'll next see you. And for those that only play FPL, the next deadline stream will be on Saturday, so keep your eyes peeled for that. The same goes for the transfer tips for Gameweek 11, the best wildcard squad, and my team selection. Until then, take care, enjoy the football, and all the best of luck for tomorrow's match between Sunderland and Everton.